It doesn't really look like it. So let's just move on into the meeting. So Janine, you want to start with introductions, or you want me to get it rolling with YDOT?
Vice Mayor, either is fine. YDOT, I believe I was just pulling up the schedule. I think they're scheduled to go first. I see them in the room there. I see Ralph Tarango, our district person. Maybe he can introduce the rest of his crew. But I have nothing meaningful to add, Vice Mayor, so it's all yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you for letting us present to you today. We appreciate this opportunity to visit with you and let you know what we're going to be doing on our highway construction projects for the next 6 years. As Janine said, I'm Ralph Tarango. I'm the district engineer. And I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Ryan Shields, the district construction engineer.
I'm Taylor McCourt, the district traffic engineer.
And I'm Andrea Staley. I am District 1 Public Relations Specialist.
And can we go ahead and get the slides up? Go ahead and go to slide 2. And so District 1 basically is Albany, Carbon, and Laramie counties. We're going to be talking about obviously Albany County tonight. Jim Espy is our transportation commissioner, and he's out of Dixon, Wyoming. Next slide, please. And this is our district staff. You met some of us here. We have Tim Morton, he's our district maintenance engineer. You met Ryan Shields, Mike Simmons, he's our Wyoming Highway Patrol captain. We have Jesse Burgess, he's our district equipment supervisor, and Taylor McCourt, he already introduced himself, and Andrea Staley. And I would like to thank Andrea. She's the one that kind of set up this meeting with you and put these slides together. So she did a great job for us. Next slide, please. So these kind of are the guys that are the boots on the ground out there. We have 2 resident engineers, Steve Cook and Corey Kramer. They've been here in Laramie for quite a long time. And then on our maintenance side, we have Eric Anderson, and he has 2 foremen underneath him, Rich Barber and Al Branscombe. So basically, the purpose of today's talk is to gather public input on the state transportation system, which will include YDOT projects in your area. And the main point of this really is we want to get public input, and we also want to kind of know what's going on with other government agencies and local agencies in our area. And I'll kind of go over some of that stuff, and then I'll turn it over to Ryan Shields, and he'll go over to the local projects here in this area, and then I'll go over next steps later on in the presentation. Next slide. Yeah. So our purpose, mission, vision, and values. The purpose is to support Wyoming's economy while safely connecting communities and improving the quality of life. And I guess one of our main goals here at YDOT is safety. It's our, safety for the traveling public and safety for our employees that are out there inspecting the work that we do. Go ahead, next slide. And these are our goals: to ensure a vibrant, safe, and competent workforce, acquire and responsibly manage resources, provide safe, reliable, and effective transportation system. And like I said, safety is like a #1 priority for us. And really encourage and support innovation and preserve our history and heritage. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So these are guiding principles, and they are in priority from 1 to 6. And our guiding principles have been established with a focus on YDOT's purpose, values, vision, and agency goals. And they kind of align with our expenditures. And I guess I only want to go over a few of these. The first one's pretty basic. We want to make sure we stay within our budget. And the second one is to focus on our critical safety issues. And we want to make sure that, and them are our main 2 goals. I guess the other one I wanted to bring up was the last one on our priority there is 6, and that's mobility and capacity. And so right now, YDOT really doesn't have enough money to maintain the assets that we have, so we're kind of in preservation mode here at YDOT. And so we really don't want to make any improvements to our system that we have to maintain. Next slide, please. YDOT does have a large inventory of assets. We have 6,700 miles of roads, 6,000 bridges and structures. And some of them structures do include like our high mast lighting, our retaining walls and our bigger sign structures. We have over 42,000 culverts, 800 miles of guardrail, 80,000 signs, and 12,000 miles of fence. Sorry. So YDOT has a kind of a bunch of programs under a big umbrella. We have engineering and planning. I'm not going to go over all these, but I just want to explain a few of them. Engineering planning, that they do make sure that they do project design and our asset management. We have our construction, which basically oversee all our construction projects and make sure they meet our plans and specification. We have our maintenance, which is our plow drivers, and they fill our potholes and they fix our fences and they work on bridges and guardrail. We have our equipment side, and we have an extensive list of equipment. We have over like between 80 and 90 plow trucks just in District 1. We have between 380 and 400 in the state, so we do have quite a bit of equipment in the state, and that does not include all the other equipment like motor graders, loaders, stuff like that. Our traffic program, they take care of our all our striping, our signs, all of our signal systems. And then of course we have our emergency communications, WildLink, which is not only used by YDOT, but it's also used by other entities like cities and counties. And we have our 24-hour TMC center, which they maintain our 511 system, and they also maintain our road condition website. And one thing that we do have that other DOTs don't have, most of them don't have, is patrol aeronautics and driver services. So we have quite a few other programs that other state agencies don't have, or other state DOTs don't have. We also have compliance and investigation, motor vehicles, title registration, license plates, and we do have all our support programs also on there, including local governments. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the new IJA bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And this is, a component of this was the Highway Trust Fund bill too. And basically YDOT received about an extra $100 million a year in revenue from the new bill. And, you know, a couple of things were added to the list, the bridges and electric vehicles. And so before we had bridges that were just kind of rolled into our surface transportation column, but now we have a separate column for them because we do have to spend $45 million on bridges a year. And then you can see we have to spend about $25 million on electric vehicles in the 5 or 6 year period. And then aeronautics, we used to get about $35 million a year for aeronautics, and that increased to about $50 million. And so you can see just right down there at the bottom, our funding for surface transportation went from about $280 million to about $339 million. And really also our federal versus state funding we're pretty comparable to the national average, about 30%, 70% split. Next slide, please. So this next slide is kind of busy, but what we did is we hired a consultant group, dye management group in 2020 to kind of evaluate our unfunded needs. And these are just the needs that we have to maintain what we have existing out there. And I guess one thing I did want to point out is before we got the IJA money, we had about $354 million total of unfunded needs. And that went down to around $267 million. That's that total there on the bottom. And our surface transportation went from about $200 million of unfunded needs to about $124 million. And I guess one thing I did also want to point out, it's affecting everybody, but we are having increases in inflation just like everybody else. So that extra money that we did get didn't go quite as far as we really expected it to. We did have some delayed construction projects, and I don't think I'll really go over any of these. None of them are in Albany County, so you can go ahead and skip to the next slide. So this just kind of shows our major construction projects, and it's kind of a busy map because, as you all know, we have a short construction season in Wyoming, and so we have to pack all these construction projects in a short construction season. But if you kind of look in kind of the northeast Wyoming, kind of from the Rollins area all the way to the eastern side there to the Nebraska state line, you can see them kind of turquoise looking dots. And we have about 12 or 13 projects on interstate. And that kind of eats up a lot of our money that we do here in District 1. We do have to go back on the interstate and we have to perform work there on like 10-year intervals for each section of road, just because we don't have the because we found out that that's about all that lasts when we're just doing mill and overlays on them projects. Next slide. So Director Reiner, the director of YDOT, did go out and he did have public meetings over our NEVI plan, our National Electric Vehicle Initiative plan. And I don't know if, I might stop for questions on this because this really is the only slide on EV charging station, but basically, we want to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support whatever type of vehicle anybody wants to drive. And I guess another thing I really wanted to point out that we will not be using state assets to install, own, or operate any of the infrastructure on there. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to get an RFP and we're going to have a consultant put out an RFP for local businesses and like truck stops and stuff like that. And if they want to take advantage of this money, it's kind of pass-through money that YDOT's passing through to them, and we'll pay for the cost of installing them electric vehicle charging stations, and it's an 80-20 split. And the 20% match will be by the private entity. And one thing we are having a little bit trouble with is there is a bunch of requirements to this that the feds make us follow. And one of them is we have to have charging stations every 50 feet, or 50 miles, sorry, not 50 feet, that would be good. But, and one of our biggest issues here is like if between here and Rollins is 100 miles, so the next location that we could have probably is like in Elk Mountain. And since these entities have to maintain these charging stations, they have to have so many chargings a day in order to make it worth their while, because they're going to have to make a profit off this, or not a profit, but they have to at least break even on these charging stations. So that's one issue, and we are asking for the federal government to make exceptions to that 50-mile rule on that. And I guess, with this being the only one, we did have quite a few questions on the charging stations and the NEVI plan. I guess if you guys have any questions on that, I'll take any questions on that now, if that's okay.
Counselor Harrington, I see your hand is raised, so go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thanks, Ralph. I do have a question on the charging station. So you mentioned an 80-20 split with businesses. It feels advantageous from the seat I'm in to ask if municipalities can participate in this as well. We certainly own a lot of sort of parking spaces in our downtown and other places that may be great, like real public benefit charging stations, especially if we are able to share the cost of installation. So I was curious if municipalities could participate.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So we're required to do our corridors first. And so that'd be I-80, I-25, and I-90. And so if there's any money left over, I believe the municipalities can be a part of this grant. And there's also other funding sources for electric vehicles. And if you go to our YDOT homepage, there is other grants that are available for that. There's just a grant button there that you can go directly to our grants, to different grants that are available there. But if we don't use all the money that was set up for these charging stations, then it will be made available to local municipalities. And, you know, this money is not coming off the roads at all. It's part of the general fund from the federal government. So this doesn't affect the highway bill at all.
Can I ask a follow-up, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds really great. And I guess maybe maybe I need a little more information on when you say the corridors. I mean, I understand the sort of like the basics of that, but I'm curious how close. I mean, are we talking like the first gas station off of I-80 is eligible, or how far in could those be? I mean, could we, I guess, you know, specifically I'm thinking like our rec center is quite close to I-80. That seems like a logical place for people to come stop for a charge. And, you know, they could obviously spend time utilizing, you know, our rec center while they do that. So that's maybe more to my question, if that maybe helps clarify it a little bit. But I think I get where you're headed with it for sure.
So we are required to meet that 50-mile distance. And so that is from the station to station. So that has to be calculated. So it isn't like mileposts on the interstate. They'll calculate how long it takes to drive actually to the station.
It's like a mile off the interstate.
Yeah, and it does have to be a mile?
I think it has to be a mile off the interstate.
There was some distance looped throughout, like a mile.
Yeah, because that's when it first came up, when they were looking to do the firehouse, right? There was questions if we could for that.
Okay, yep. And that's another requirement, a mile from the interstate.
Sure. And I guess maybe, you know, I don't know if these are, this requirement to use a business match is, you know, federal regulations handed to you all, or if you have flexibility in allowing municipalities to participate. But I think that would be quite valuable, you know, to the public. So just would urge that addition if it's at all possible. Thank you.
I guess I should probably mention one more thing about the EV charging stations too, and that is that we do have our document out there right now to submit to the federal government for public comment. And so if you go to our homepage, you can do public comments on that page, and that'd be a great place to put that comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see the mayor is here and he's got his hand up, but before I turn the wheel, as long as we're talking transportation, turn the wheel over to the mayor. I noticed that our county commissioners had their hand raised previously, and I'm just wondering if they got their question answered or if their hand accidentally went down.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. No, we were just thinking along the same lines as Councilor Harrington with regard to the charging stations and some of the places that we might be able to think about putting them.
Great, thank you. So Mayor Weaver, the wheel is yours.
Vice Mayor Pierce, thank you very much, and thank you for getting us started. This is just such a really important meeting that we have regarding STIP every year, and this topic, I can tell you folks, is of great interest to the residents in this community, in this city, and in this county. I participated in the public comment period myself, and I just heard you say that you're accepting ongoing, but there was a specific public comment period, I believe, that had a hard closing date on it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe there is a deadline, and it might be in my slide there. 11th of July.
End of July.
The end of July.
I think it might be end of July.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, for clarity, it's July 27th. I'm just on the website now.
Okay, yeah, end of July then.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad that it's not yet over, because I think anytime that people still have an opportunity to get their views on this in, and I think if they read through the plan, it's very interesting. And I think there's going to be a number of residents across the state that are going to have input for you about this. And that was the heart of my question right there, because I'm very curious to see, and unfortunately this meeting hasn't come at that time, but I'm very curious to see what the general what the general assessment of that public comment is when all is said and done. I know that our community is going to be pretty supportive of this, and the more interconnected we can get with EV use, you know, throughout the state, throughout all the communities in the state, the better probably. And I think coming in from a long-term view, it's the way to go, because I think most of the assessments, right, most of the people way above my pay grade that pay attention to this anticipate we're going to be seeing more and more of these on the road faster and faster as we go forward. And you folks have a better grasp on that than I do. So I think these are the kinds of moves that need to be made. Appreciate you giving me that information. I also agree very much with those views about seeing where we can fill in some gaps when this project's over, and seeing if we can team up together at the state and the various cities. I think that's a good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any other questions on the charging stations?
Looks like Councilor Harrington maybe has a follow-up, guys, so we'll go to him.
Sorry to get into the weeds a little bit, Mayor. This is a very specific question, but because I'm on the website now, I just had a quick question about navigating that that I hoped you all could answer. So I had clicked on the submit a comment button, and it asks to select a topic, and I don't see either the NEVI program or EV charging stations as an option, and I was wondering if you all could point me in the right direction so it's categorized appropriately on your end.
Looking right now, I might get back to you if that's okay.
Of course, of course.
Okay, anyone else on this topic before we keep going? I know this is a topic of interest for us, but this isn't the only time that we'll have to weigh in on it. Public comment is still open, as you all heard. Okay, I guess we're ready to move to the next thing.
Next slide, please. So under the Bridge Formula Program, as I mentioned before, we are receiving $45 million per year. And there's going to be at least 15 million of that funds need to go to address local government poor condition bridges. And we did, so YDOT basically what we do, bridge inspections on all our off-system bridges and all your bridges too, every couple of years. And what they do is they find out the ones in poor condition. And actually there was, and they made a list of the ones that were in poor condition, and there was not any in Albany County that were in poor condition. So you guys did not have any on that list.
And then if you just want to press for the EV charging stations, if you just go all the way down and do other, that would probably be the best option. It goes to our public affairs office and our headquarters, and they will be able to filter through any sort of questions that you would have. Unfortunately, I thought they would have the NEVI specific option, but if you just go all the way down to other, that will work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to mention on this slide here that we do have on our YDOT homepage, you can click on the grants, and it gives you a quick link over to our grants section on that. And a lot of these grants for the IDGA bill too, they are a work in progress. We do not have all the rules yet. And on the next page there, we do have our grant opportunities. And if you can see on the bottom right-hand corner, it says new grant programs. And the ones on the asterisk there, I'm not going to go over all these, but the one on asterisk there are the new grant programs. We have several for roads and bridges, for safety, passenger rail, public transportation, airports and aviation, electric vehicles. And most of the discretionary grants that we have, YDOT is basically just the pass-through agency for them grants. So you guys would probably have to apply for any grants that you see in there that you might qualify for. And then we would, we'd have a contact person on that web page to get a hold of to help out with that. we have a question? I see a hand up on the screen there.
We've got a question coming in from Councilor Schuster, and I just want to clarify, when you go to that public comment drop-down menu, as you say, sir, you go to grants, and then there's another sub-menu for electric vehicles. So that's the one. If that's the one that you're interested in, that's the way you want to go to. And I will say, folks, that's a little confusing. People may want to go to that, and then they don't know where to go. So I don't know what we can do to help you. And what to do to help each other to make sure we can clarify that, because it's hard enough to get people to sometimes give you a response, and then when they have to dig around, I bet we get a dropout rate there. I'm going to go to Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you. The grants thing was what I was really going to ask about, because I work for Wyotech, and we are building a brand new automotive section, and in the building we are doing EV charging for our test vehicles so that we can work on them and maintain them. So I'm kind of wondering, how far do the grants go? Is it going to be something where as a training school we could go in for that, or are we not sure?
Mr. Mayor, I was having a hard time understanding that question.
Sure, I'll ask Councilor Schuster to restate it if you can, and I'll listen. And if you still can't hear him, I'll bet I can hear him, and I'll pass it on. Go ahead, Councilor Schuster.
Okay, I think maybe our mics aren't working good for the program. We have issues every so often. We are a training facility. I work for Wyotech. We're building our brand new automotive section, and we have put EV charging stations inside the building so that we can work on EV cars to train new technicians on it. Is the grant program going to do anything for a school that will be training on EV cars, or will it only be for installing stations that the general public can hook up to?
You know, I'm not aware of any grants for that, but we can certainly check into it and get back to you on that.
Yeah, that'd be great. That would be great. And you know, if there are grants that maybe aren't YDOT pass through, but there are other, there might be grants for educational institutions and municipalities to look into, and you guys could point us in the right direction. You folks at YDOT could point us in the right direction. If you have a head start on that information, of course, we'd appreciate it. And notwithstanding the fact that those opportunities for partnership that we have already talked about, of course, we'd still want to pursue those as well. But I think this is kind of an all hands on deck thing with this effort. So anything you can do would be, of course, greatly appreciated. Vice Mayor Pierce is here.
Yeah, just mostly to Councilor Schuster's point. He makes an interesting point, and you know, Wyotech is a private entity, right? It's a private business, and they could make those stations potentially available to the public, as well as themselves to some extent in terms of training. So it might be a matter of inside outside location and using when they're not in use by the public. I don't know, but I think there's some potential opportunity there for Wyotech in terms of some of this grant money. I have no idea, but I'm just speculating.
Ours are already installed and they are inside the building. We'd have to tear up brand new concrete to try to put anything outside.
Well, I think there's a lot of interest in this in the public and private sector. And as I said, I think it's kind of an all hands on deck thing. And so when we can help each other, we should. And of course, we'd look forward to those potential partnerships we already talked about. This is really great. I guess maybe we're ready for the next item.
So basically, this is just a slide of our STIP process. And, you know, only a couple of things on here. Right now, we're in that third dot there, the June to August, the public input part. But I wanted to talk a little bit about our STIP inputs. We do have performance measures that we do have to meet at YDOT, both federal and state. And we have a bridge management system, a pavement management system, and a safety management system that we do have to meet certain criteria for the federal government on that. And, and then we come up with our candidate projects, and then we have our public input, is what we're doing now, and then we submit them projects to the Transportation Commission for approval, and we award it usually to the low bidder, our projects. So this is a map basically of all our STIP projects. Looks like I can't see the right hand, but there is a legend there on the right hand side, and it's colored according to STIP year. And this is a good way to basically leave your comments also. You can organize this on our webpage per county and per year, and it has different queries you can do like that. And then you can go to specific projects and leave comments for projects on this web page. And this is our highway project process, and this can take anywhere from a few months to several years, depending on the scope of the project. Right now, we're in the planning stage, the STIP development. And I guess I do want to mention too that our STIP can change throughout the year depending on funding and how the cost of our projects do come in. And so some projects we can pull in projects if we have them ready, and we can actually have to delay projects if we don't have the funding for them. And we do have public meetings throughout our phases. Next slide, please. And basically in the STIP document, go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll kind of show you on the next slide what's in our STIP document. So on the STIP document, you'll see in the red, we have Albany County. And then on the map there, the blue projects are future projects, and the red projects are 2022 projects. Next slide, please. And on our on this table here, what we have here is basically the general location, the character of work, and the cost of our projects. And I guess the character of work, I kind of, that's basically the main thing that we're doing on that project. That would be everything that we're doing on that project. Next slide, please. And this is kind of just a cost breakdown that we're going to be spending in Albany County per year. You can see that, the total cost of our 6-year STIP is about $113 million, and that does include 2022. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ryan Shields, our district construction engineer, and he'll go over the projects for the next 6 years that are in our STIP.
Okay, thanks, Ralph. So yeah, I'll just step through each of our projects that we have programmed and give a few details. You'll probably hear the words mill and overlay about 1,000 times. Like Ralph said, we're kind of in pavement preservation mode, right? And that's the majority of our projects. But if you have specific questions on a project that I don't cover, definitely stop me and we can delve deeper into it if the format allows for that. So.
Sure, but before you get started, of course, you understand when you're talking to the city council, we love to hear about mill and overlay and pavement preservation. We're very much fans of those things, so no worries there.
Awesome. No, it's a very good thing. Don't get me wrong. It can just be, it's just the same thing over and over, right? So, so here in 22, these are the jobs that you'll see us working on right now. So we'll start with those. So this project, one that's kicking off this week, will be out on 230. So it begins essentially at the 130-230 intersection and goes to the west for whatever that is, 9 miles or so. A mill and overlay. We will be adding left turn lanes at the Hanson Arena for operation and safety. So that's a good thing that we're getting those in there, and also a right turn lane to Palo Lane, which I think is the one that goes to Lake Hattie and the Plains Lakes. So a couple of turn lanes and an overlay. This project is an I-80 project up top there, the top of the canyon, the Vidavoo section. It involved mill and overlay and some structure bridge rehabilitation work. The bridge work is completed, so we're waiting for the paving contractor to come in and do that part of it. It's about 6 miles, as you can see, and it is both eastbound and westbound, so 12 miles total. And you can look at the cost, almost 10 million bucks, and kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. About $1 million a mile or thereabouts, maybe just short of that. And that was bid prices last year, right? We're seeing quite a bit higher now. So just to kind of give you that context, what we're paying to keep I-80 up and running, for having 200 miles of it to take care of each way, it's a lot of money. This project is the new traffic signal at 3rd and Flint Street. So the contractor's out there working right now. And this was really born out of a pedestrian safety concern, how there wasn't a safe way to cross 3rd at that location. Depending on the time of day, that's, you see people playing Frogger across the road, and we don't want that. So we'll have a traffic signal with, crosswalks and a safe crossing. So we're excited about that one. This is the I-80 project through town, and I know you've seen this work zone last summer and this summer. It involved a lot of structure, rehabilitation, and repair. All of that stuff is done. The bulk of that was done last year. So right now we're working on wrapping up the resurfacing. So right now it's a concrete roadway. We've done a lot of slab repairs to fix the bad parts, and then we'll overlay it all with an inch of high performance wear course asphalt. So if you live next to I-80 out there, I would expect you'll notice a big difference in the road noise, the tire noise. It should be a lot quieter. That'll be a good benefit for the folks that live around there. So we're looking to wrap this up here later this summer. And then this is just a slide of our district-wide projects that we program every year. Things like we have a project for concrete slab repairs, for miscellaneous bridge rehabilitation, our chip seals, crack seals, and contract patching, which is just kind of an overlay project. Those are the more, they're the smaller jobs, but they allow us to be kind of flexible and kind of meet the needs that are the worst of the worst, kind of skip around the district to do that. So it's all very needs-based. So in any given year, it's just going to be there. It might not, we'll have some in Albany, some in Laramie and Carbon. It depends on where we need to be. So that takes us to fiscal year 23. So the projects that you'll be seeing starting next summer. So this is the first 10 miles of Wyoming 34. That's the highway up north that goes, to Seville Canyon and over to Wheatland. We'll be doing the first 10 miles of that, another mill and overlay project. This is a very similar project on US 30 here north of town. Another mill and overlay, same year. And then this is really the big project you'll see next summer for sure. This is the replacement of the Curtis Street Interchange Bridge. So that's a fairly old and antiquated structure type, and one that, quite frankly, we just really can't rehab anymore, in a cost-effective way. So it's time to replace it, and also replace it with a bridge that will operate better in terms of traffic up there. So we've all been up there, and there's a million trucks trying to make a left turn, and no left turn lanes. So the new bridge will be 3 lanes wide. There'll be a left turn lane to kind of get those left turners out of the traffic stream and keep people moving. I think that'll be the biggest operational benefit that I see there. And then there's also kind of the context sensitive amenities. There's the decorative bridge railing. There'll be a pathway on the bridge, and all the things that we would want to see in the community context there too. So big project. The construction will necessitate a detour. So there'll be a closure of that bridge while we build the new one. That structure type didn't lend itself to us ripping half of it out and building the new one next to it. It all had to come down, and the unfortunate part of that is, there will be a detour during construction. So we'll look to keep coordinating with the city on that. There are city routes that we're using, Pierce and Cedar, for that. And we'll do what we can to to definitely minimize the construction duration to incentivize, as quick of a completion as we can with the contractor. Looks like there's a few questions on this one.
Yes, sir. I was just about to ask you if you could please pause. I feel like I'm in a college class where I'm writing notes quickly with all the projects that you're going through because I want to ask a bunch of questions about them, but I don't want to take too long. So I'm going to go to Councilmember Somerville. I'm going to go to the Vice Mayor, and that's in order. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the presentation on this project. I personally live over in this area, and it's a project that's long overdue and getting completed. But I had a couple of just quick questions. I know that there'll be a pathway and some pedestrian safety, which is great. Do we have any thoughts to how people on electric scooters should be crossing that bridge? And I only say that because I'm seeing them coming home. People are using the bird scooters to come that direction.
And do you folks, do you know what we're talking about when we
Yes.
met? Okay, all right, of course.
Yep, they're everywhere.
Okay,
I do, the sidewalk that we're putting on is one of the wider kind of shared use path ones. I think it's a 10-foot clear pathway if I'm not mistaken. So, and I'm not an expert on, riding scooters on sidewalks and things like that in the city. So you guys know more than I do about that. But, I would think that would definitely be an option. At the end of the bridge, at the westbound off-ramp, the pathway will cross that off-ramp, which there's not a lot of times you have, a crosswalk across an interchange ramp like that. So we put as much thought as we could into, putting a raised island there with the cut through and some marked crosswalks and signage and, whatever we could do to make that crossing as safe as possible to connect up to your city sidewalk system.
I appreciate that. That's great. Mayor, I have two other quick questions if I can.
sure. I just also want to say that, this issue with the scooters is actually probably something we need to look at going forward. It's not so much a YDOT issue, but we don't allow for those to be on the sidewalks. However, on these high traffic interstate connective bridges and things like that, I'm not sure if we want people on their 30-mile-an-hour scooter. So might need to look at some signage and some modifications. Go ahead, Councilor Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. And actually, to that point, bike lanes, those are also becoming more popular from West Laramie. So maybe that is a discussion that we should have in the convening months between YDOT and the city, not just the bird scooters, but the bikes and how to get people across there safely. Personally, I see way too many close calls on that road all the time.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so go ahead.
Were you talking bike lanes on Curtis itself or where?
Yes. Yes, and specific to the bridge, again, how do you want bicycles to cross the bridge? Because you really don't, I'm imagining it's not ideal to have them in the same lanes as the semis.
Oh, totally
They're coming
agree.
off the interstate.
I think we don't want them in the roadway at all, and I wonder if there might be some way at this point in the planning stage to get some signage to direct people that in this instance, those types of vehicles need to be on a separated pedestrian type avenue. I'm not sure. I apologize, Councilor Somerville. Keep going.
That's okay. My second question is in relation to Gateway kind of aesthetics. So this is obviously one of two interstate interchanges that enter into West Laramie. It's probably the busiest of the two by far. And so could you talk a little bit more in depth about public art additions, landscaping, anything in addition that you guys will be doing beyond the standard bridge construction?
Sure. I think, the biggest thing is probably the decorative pedestrian railing. It'd be very similar to the look at Harney Street, powder coated black railing. I think we have some block MSE walls around the corner, where it wraps around down on the berm below. That's probably more for the people driving by on I-80 to see that. But I guess in terms of landscaping and other things, I don't think we have a lot of that. I know that, on some of the bridges along the pathway system, we've looked at landscape agreements recently. I think it's a case-by-case basis for sure. But if it made sense, I'm sure it's something that we could consider. I don't want to speak for Ralph, that's his call. But I don't think. plans currently.
I appreciate that, and if I can just make a kind of a request that we put that on the discussion list as well, in terms of gateway enhancements for Laramie. When we have this type of project, it just seems like a prime opportunity to make those kind of changes when we can while we're doing a huge project. And Mayor, the third question I have is really more along the impact to the businesses that are there. If the bridge is going to be shut down completely, how do we communicate with them? And then the second question is, will YDOT be doing anything additional to detour traffic over the Snowy Range? I'm assuming it's going to detour on the new bridge that was just recently built down Snowy Range and then up Pierce Street for anybody that needs to access that northern section. Could you speak to those 2 points a little bit?
Sure. So yeah, just like you said, the detour will be Pierce to Snowy Range Road to Cedar, and then back the other way, depending on which one they're trying to go to. We'll be putting in a temporary traffic signal at the intersection of Cedar and Curtis, just because that's a stop sign right now, and bringing all those vehicles to there, a large percentage of them probably being trucks. We don't want the delay to be excessive, so we'll put a temp signal there to control that. I believe we're putting an overlay on Pierce to handle the traffic. And we've had those conversations in the past with the city, I believe. I know we've held public meetings about that, but I think your point about engaging with the businesses is critical, and if that's something that we can do together, if there's an interface there. We've kind of done that in Cheyenne and the downtown through their Downtown Development Authority. They've helped us communicate with businesses, and that's been a big help. Usually that our resident engineer, it's Corey Kramer running this job, and that's something that he would definitely do as well. So, but we want that process to go smoothly, and we're always up for, coordinating or suggestions or whatever. We recognize that it is, an impact to the public and to those businesses, and we really want to minimize that as much as we possibly can.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll certainly volunteer to help you make those connections. Certainly the truck stops that are in that area will be impacted, but there is also a very, very, very large daycare on Developmental Preschool is on North Pierce Street there, just south of that intersection. So any work that we can do together to communicate with those businesses, try to help them plan, educate staff, whatever ahead of time, I think will go a long way in terms of community goodwill. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, no,
Thank you, Council. Oh, go ahead. No, thank you, Councilmember Somerville. Those are really good questions, and I just want to touch on this. It doesn't matter how much of that we do. Inevitably, it seems that there's always this reaction that no one knew these massive public works projects, infrastructure projects are coming until the day they start, and then all hell breaks loose. So we need to just do everything we can to preview this. And I know you folks share that concern with us as well. So I just want to echo and reiterate that. Vice Mayor, you've been waiting, and then I've got 2 folks.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Councilor Somerville asked my question, and it was to give a shout out for public art or some level of beautification, and just to let the folks from YDOT know, we have a pretty active art group here in town that could potentially reach out and get some Manching grant monies aside from city funds. So there are options out there in our community to help beautify the new bridge. So thanks.
Absolutely, and I think there is an expectation for that. We had some extra work towards that end during the process of the other bridge. Councilmember Schuster, thank you for waiting.
Thank you very much. I don't believe I heard you talk about it. I heard talk about detours, but in my understanding, excuse me, people would still be able to get off the Curtis Street exit. There would be no ability to cross the bridge. So people that are eastbound could get off there, still go to the Iron Skillet, still get back on the interstate at that mile marker. And again, people going westbound could then have the Pilot and the Loves. So as far as I know, they still have the ability to access those two truck stops on that side and get back on going westbound at that intersection. Just no trucks would have the ability to cross the bridge. If that is correct, I just wanted to double check on that. Thank you.
Yes, Council, that's correct. The ramps will be open. It's just that the bridge will be severed, right? That connection is the only thing that's gone. We will be doing some work on the ramps, some paving, but you know, that'll just be under traffic. They'll be shifted over. But yes, the ramps will be open throughout.
Thank you.
Thank you again for waiting, Councilmember Schuster. Councilmember Gabriel, thank you for waiting.
Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate the presentation tonight. I was in the Sheridan area this past weekend and noticed, since we're talking about bridges, just a general question about the very attractive bridge I saw north of Sheridan on 90. I haven't seen many in the state quite like that, similar to some of the ones you might see in Colorado, very decorative and, you know, some very nice plants and all that kind of stuff. I think you know what I'm talking about. I was just wondering how that is chosen to be in that particular area, and you know why some other bridges maybe aren't as attractive as some others might be.
Okay, thanks. So that particular bridge, the North Sheridan Interchange, a lot of the decorative enhancements, those were all funded by the city, or I shouldn't say all, I think a very large portion of them. And I don't remember the exact number, but I know that there was a lot of money spent to make that bridge look like it does. And that wasn't whiteout funding, that was initiatives raised through the town. So, you know, when we do a bridge at YDOT in an urban context, we do have a percentage that we can apply to those context sensitive amenities, and we do reach out to the cities to do those things. That's kind of an automatic deal, you know, whenever we're gonna do these things. And it's limited to what, Ralph, is it 3%? 3%, yes. So, you know, we'll look to maximize that every time. And this one was definitely no different. Anything on top of that, you know, that's where I think the municipality would have to pitch in.
Would you always contact the particular city and ask if there's any funding available, something the city might want to do to enhance the attractiveness of a bridge? Yeah, that would be part of our process, and you know, and I would for sure look to do that personally, just to make sure that we don't miss that boat. You know, I wasn't around for the discussions on this one. This bridge has been, you know, as Councilman Somerville said, it's been in the works for a long time. So, you know, it's probably been a better part of, 8-10 years it's been talked about. So I don't know the original discussions on this one. Great, I appreciate it. Thank you.
City Manager Jordan.
Thank you. I had a quick question, and actually, based on the last question, maybe a little bit of context. City of Laramie sought a number of years ago, working with a previous district engineer, to incorporate the YDOT entranceways into the city within the city limits through an annexation. And I think that was Pat Person, Ralph, your predecessor, who had agreed to work with us to annex into the city those interchanges, and notably the conversation that we're having right now, the Curtis Street Bridge area. The reason we cared about that is across the state, these interchange and on-ramp areas are in fact annexed into all kinds of cities across I-80 and I-25. And for some reason, Laramie's weren't. So we were nearly to the point of annexing these, and the reason we cared was because then our beautification and landscape requirements would apply, Councilor Gabriel. Unfortunately, we received direction from Cheyenne to rescind, for YDOT to rescind that annexation request, and consequently this area has never been annexed in, and thereby council is not subject to the typical landscape and beautification requirements of city code as are required of all other lands that are located on entranceways. So I want to put that out there because that would have been a tool that the city would typically have used, and most other cities in Wyoming have, but unfortunately we did not because of the state direction to not allow the city of Laramie to annex our interchanges. Anyway, context and history, whether it's needed or not, I don't know. The question I had for you, Mr. Tarango, was with respect to one of your grants. And I was thinking of it because here at the city, we've been looking over the last couple of months into one of the grants you mentioned. And it seems like it might be a useful thing as we talk in the future about projects like the Curtis Street Interchange and pedestrian and non-motorized access. And that particular grant is, let me get the name of it, but it is a grant that allows for construction, but more importantly, from our standpoint, the opportunity for safe streets and roads action plans. And I wonder, maybe this isn't the right time, Mayor, but when the time is right, if you guys could tell us what you know about that and whether it would be applicable to a city of our size with no fatalities noted within the city limits, because we're hung up on whether we're a suitable applicant, because we're a small town and while we have a lot of crashes, we do not have fatalities. And one of the action plan goals was to create an action plan to demonstrate that you could minimize fatalities. But of course, if your fatalities are zero, are you actually a viable applicant? Anyway, I hope that wasn't off topic, Mayor. I'll let you decide whether it was or not.
City Manager, you're very unlikely to hear me tell you that you're off topic. I would like to, and I would like to thank you for the history and context. I don't expect our folks from the state agency like YDOT to have much to say about this. I'll go ahead and say it. From time to time, our values here in Laramie on things like aesthetics, public art programs, our landscaping requirements and things like that don't necessarily always suit those who make decisions for statewide budgets, and little things like rescinding annexation and other little nasty surprises come up for our community here. And I'll speak to that. We don't particularly care for it, but we'll operate in the world that we have to operate in. I would like to see if you wanted to answer the city manager's question at this point in time about the.
I think it's, Mr. Mayor, I think it's are you talking about the TAP grants?
Yeah, well, as specifically with respect to the action plan question that she just asked.
So the grants that I know about are the TAP grants, which are the Transportation Alternative Program. And I think that's what, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what you're talking about. And them are competitive grants. And we actually just had an increase in available money from the federal that we decided, YDOT actually decided to increase the amount of money that is available for them grants. And so before this year, it was a maximum of $500,000 available, and it was a 80-20 match. Now there's, I think it's a $1.25 million grant, and now it's only a 90-10 match on them TAP grants. And them TAP grants go in front of a committee to decide which ones they decide. And the way they determine that, a lot of times, safety is definitely a consideration, but they also look at if there's right-of-way acquisition that needs to be acquired. And there's also, you know, they look at things like, you know, how far along you are in the planning station. So if you have a plan set that's up to 30% or something like that, then they'll look at that for consideration. And I believe there is, on the committee, I believe there is a University of Wyoming professor on that. And I don't remember the name of the person on that committee. But anyway, them are competitive grants. And since we did raise that limit for them TAP grants, I believe we had over 40 grant applications for the money available. And I believe there are $7.5 million available for them TAP grants statewide. And the city of Cheyenne, or city of Laramie, has received the TAP grants in the past several times, actually. And I guess
I hope that our little sidebar about gateways and annexing wasn't necessarily dovetailed with our TAP. We have been successful with some TAP, and I think we're going to need to continue to work with you know, our plans and to pursue those grants because they've been very helpful and very popular here. City Manager, did you have any follow up? Did that address the question that you wanted to get to the heart of?
Yeah, I think it's good enough, and I can certainly follow up with Ralph and his crew elsewhere. So it sounds to me like this new safety program, that Safe Streets and Roads for All, is going to fall under TAP, which makes sense. And you're correct. We've received many TAP grants over the years. This just seemed like a new opportunity that's popped up lately, and we're trying to wrap our head around it. So we'll keep doing that, and I'll reach out if I have more questions for you guys. Thank you.
And if
Absolutely, City Manager.
If I may, Mayor, too, also, each entity can actually apply for 2 grants. So they can apply for a Safe Routes to School grant also. That's an additional $1.25 million in addition to the construction grant that I mentioned previously. And that's new this year also.
And that's really good news, and it's good to hear that the funding sources have been bumped up for that. Those have been really important dollars for our community that we've benefited from, and that there's been a lot of support for and appreciation for when we've been able to get into and utilize those dollars. Any other questions on this part of the presentation for these folks? Really putting you guys through your paces here. Thank you. At least it feels like it to me. So I guess we're ready to go to the next part.
All right, so this project is a lighting upgrade at the intersection of Wyoming 130 and 230. It's purely a safety project. We do have lights to light the intersection out there now, but it's an old system that it just needs upgraded, frankly. So this will be a project you see next summer. And then this is our district-wide project slide again, all the quick hitter jobs that we kind of reserve to address, to put out fires. So takes us to 2024.
You know what? Let me ask you to pause just for a moment. I really wanted to make sure the commissioners get every opportunity, and I know they wouldn't be shy about piping up. But Mr. Chairman, are we okay over there for questions?
Yep, we're just looking forward to 2024, 2026.
All right. Okay.
All right. So here's another mill and overlay job on Wyoming 13. This one does involve a bridge replacement as well. This is another safety project that we have in the works. So this is on I-80 up in the Summit Tavern section, we call it, milepost 327. That 1-2 mile stretch is one of the very highest for run off the road winter weather crashes. So, Ralph alluded that we have a safety management system. The goal of that system is to, analyze crash data, figure out what's causing those crashes, and then suggest fixes that we can put on the ground to reduce those numbers. And this is a great example of one of those projects. So we're looking to do a high friction surface treatment on the Interstate 80 surface to keep cars on the road, in those conditions where it's not all the way iced over, but close, and then also to try to fill in some potential or to potentially fill in some gaps in the snow fence that we have up there. So another safety project like that. This is the Bill Nye Phase 2 project, which is currently slated for 2024. Obviously this being Phase 2, this is the continuation of Bill Nye, from where it is now at Boulder to the west. So involves new roadway construction, new sanitary sewer, new storm sewer. It's a very sizable project, and it's one where as the design has progressed, the estimated cost has also increased. So I know that we've had talks with the city, on that estimate, and we're, I think in the process of working together to figure out where this thing lands, honestly. But currently it's still sitting in 2024. And then again, our district-wide project, I would say this time, I think our contract patching job, which is an overlay job, I would anticipate that we'll be doing Snowy Range Road between the 230-130 junction and I-80. That's a stretch that we've wanted to get done for a few years, but unfortunately we've had other projects in that area, or it would be in the middle of that Cedar Street bridge replacement detour, not Cedar Street, Curtis Street, thank you. So we wanted to get to this section earlier, but unfortunately this is probably the year that we'll be doing it. And look at that, we're at 2025 already. So this is definitely the big project in 25. This is our big 3rd Street project. It ranges, from Boswell all the way to Curtis. So essentially all of 3rd Street in town. Mill and overlay for sure, but there are also a ton of other things. ADA improvements, at the major intersections downtown, we'll be putting in holdouts, curb extensions to, reduce the ped crossing distance, make pedestrians more visible. Some ped safety treatments that really belongs in the downtown environment like we have here. The traffic signals, pretty much all of them, I think all of the ones downtown, they'll be upgraded to new systems. The Spring Creek bridge or culvert that we have, it's just right out here by Mr. Mills Burgers, that one, it'll be completely replaced with a bridge that has a sidewalk on it, so peds won't have to go onto the shoulder to cross the bridge like they do now. And then we'll have some decorative medians, that we have worked with the downtown development folks on through the process as well. Those are still in the works. So another big project, should be a very exciting one. And I think I saw a hand raised for that one too.
Yeah, Councilor Schuster.
Thank you. My question was going to be, are we going to have a walk piece, just like he said on Spring Creek? Because right now we have our nice beautification project where we put walking paths down there, but people had to come onto the street to cross it. So he already said there was going to be a walking path again on the bridge. That was completely my question. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, so this project is another I-80 mill and overlay. It's the I-80 section from Laramie going west, back 10 miles. So we'll be splitting these two up, the eastbound and westbound. The westbound job lives in this fiscal year. So this is another safety project programmed, with our safety funds that we have. So this will be to add 1 or 2 left turn lanes to major approaches south of town on US 287. It's an area where we've had, crashes in the past, and, a place with very high volumes, especially this time of year, high speeds, and one where, a left turn lane is definitely a safety treatment that we want to do. So we'll see how far the money goes. We have about $800,000 in safety funds to do it. So I'm hoping that gets us 2. It might be 1, but we'll look to put it where the greatest need is. And then our obligatory district-wide project slide again. So in fiscal year 26, we have a project on 130 east of Centennial, so a few miles out there, another mill and overlay project. This is a bridge replacement on US 30 just north of town here. Another older structure in poor condition that we're looking to replace. This is the eastbound lane section from earlier, the I-80 section, Laramie West. Sister project to the other one. And again, our district-wide projects. So we're out to 2027. Another job on Highway 130 west of Laramie, mill and overlay. This is an I-80 project, Laramie going east, so that, whatever that is, 6 miles, essentially to the bottom of Telephone Canyon there. This is both directions, though, east and westbound. And this project is one that we got back in our STIP. It extends here on 287 south of town, right about Huron Street. We have a 5-lane going south that ends about Huron and it next down to 2 lanes. What this project will do is carry that 5-lane section 2 miles further south through the intersection of City Ranch Road. So 5 lanes through there with the left turn lane, which again, that left turn lane is primarily a safety treatment, due to the left-hand turn crashes that we've we've seen through there over the years. So this is a project we're excited to get back in there. And our district-wide projects again. And I think we only have 1 year left after this. That brings us to 2028. So pretty far out. And then this is a job we programmed to redo the surfacing up Telephone Canyon on I-80. We just did that 2 years ago in 2020, but as Ralph said, we've learned that if we don't get in there and do those projects on a regular schedule, especially a place like this that's very difficult to work, we're really going to regret it when it blows up. So this is just getting that in the planning cycle so that we can be ready. And again, our district-wide projects that we'll kind of use to react to needs. I think that's really all I have. Unless you have any more questions on specific projects or questions on why we don't have a project in there, or I guess whatever you have.
Yeah, I anticipate there might be a couple of questions. We've got some coming up. It's great to kind of get this 6-year preview. Honestly, it's a long time, but it's also a short time, as we all well understand. A lot of projects of interest there to people in the county and the city with the same thing, honestly, but with different boundaries. Councilmember Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, I concur. It's been a great presentation to get all this information here. I'm curious, any idea as to what size miracle we're going to need to get Colorado to start increasing the size and number of lanes of 287 south of the state line to kind of match things up?
So about a year ago, I had talked to their equivalent to the district traffic engineer down there, south of the border, and she indicated that their plans were really to build some passing lanes, and at that point, that was it. So I think they have some capacity improvements like that may help, kind of eliminate the queuing and maybe the frustration, but I don't think that they have any, large divided highway projects programmed for sure, based on the letter.
And then, Mayor, if I may ask an unrelated follow-up, starting to see more autonomous vehicles, not just the fully independent vehicles, but also things like lane assist and whatnot. Curious if we're taking that into considerations, we're considering where we put the painted line on the rumble bars and how that might affect bicyclists and things like that on some of these larger highways. Can you speak to that very briefly, if I make sense?
So I think just with the nation kind of transitioning to those types of technologies, we'll start to see those types of changes come here. One thing that if you've driven I-25 in Cheyenne, we have 6-inch wide stripes on that road. That's the first one in the state. And then, I'm sure you've all driven in Colorado, you've seen that they're pretty much doing it everywhere. And it really is, kind of preparing for that. I would say that we want to make sure we do it at the right pace and we're not putting it out there too early. And it's also, it's a greater cost to maintain it. We've run those numbers and kind of gone through those scenarios. We paint a road and it lasts 1 year, so if we up our material by 50%, you can imagine we don't have the money to do that, but we also recognize that that's where the world's going. So, there's been thought put into that. And I think we will start to see those types of changes getting kind of pushed from the national level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Guys, I used to be in YDOT and fly some of you folks around. And there was a discussion then about overlaying, having a finite ability to do that. And when it no longer can be overlaid where you have to make construction decisions. Are we in that world coming up in places in Albany County, or can you, as the technology increase, so that you can overlay for the next 10 years and still maintain the road?
I think, so are you asking, is there a limit to our pavement preservation strategy? I mean, are we going to get to a point where we just can't do overlays anymore?
That's I think where are we in that timeline?
Yeah, that's something I'm very interested into, and we are as well. It's something we've talked to our materials lab about. I think at some point, you're right. I think it's realistic that we run into a point of diminishing returns, and where is that? At some point, I think it becomes a life cycle type of an analysis, and I know we have people in our headquarters that are looking at that, and I think that's where we'll have to go. But yeah, I don't think we've come to the end of it yet. I mean, I think we obviously are still kind of keeping things afloat, but I agree the thinking needs to definitely be along those lines.
Follow up to that? Yeah.
Yeah, just an unrelated question. It seemed like the infrastructure bill that was passed was city streets and bike lanes and a movement towards bike boulevards. Maybe is that something that's being considered at YDOT and to assist municipalities and counties with that type of effort?
I don't think right now, honestly. I think we're focusing on keeping our system up and moving vehicles still. And I know in an urban context, the situation is completely different. Moving people means different things, on I-80 versus, on 3rd Street, right? But I'm struggling to think where we have bike lanes on the state system. It's something that we don't really have a lot of statewide, to be honest with you. And I guess if we do start thinking that in the future, my thing is always safety. Mixing cars with bikes, I just want to make sure it's done right. And I know there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of, the newer organizations, NACTO, all of that. But I think it comes down to safety and doing it the right way.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Anything else? Chairman Gosar, Commissioner Ibarra?
No, we're good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Appreciate that. I really appreciate that question. Vice Mayor, if you don't mind, can I piggyback on one of Chairman Gosar's questions real quickly? My question is, in the city for our streets, we use we have somebody come in to help us do a pavement condition index to try to help us decide how much more we can get out of a given section of infrastructure before it's total rebuild time. Do you folks there have a similar approach in determining what kind of longevity you're still going to get out of I-80 and different state highways and things that help you determine how much more life you can get before, as the chairman said, we get to total rebuild time? And does that help guide your decision there? We're not just crossing our fingers and hoping for the best, right?
Well, we do have a pavement management system where we do measure rut depths, cracks, skid resistance and stuff like that. And that's basically how we determine which priority of roads we're gonna pave. Now, I can tell you from experience on I-80, if we don't get there every 10 years, then we're gonna be in trouble. Ryan talked about the project up on Vitavue, and I think it's been a little bit less than 10 years. And we're seeing a lot of degradation there on that road, before we even got there in 10 years. And I guess to your point on when it's going to need reconstructed, because it's, the cost of reconstruction is considerably more than a mill and overlay. And so if we don't get to it in time and we do have to reconstruct it, this is going to cost us more money. And we have talked to our materials program about coring sections of road, just to see how much stripping there is in our asphalt, to see how much of a structure we have left, to see what we need to do to kind of get a little bit more robust system as far as a pavement management system goes. But there is definitely a curve, right? If you give it an overlay within a certain amount of time, you preserve that pavement. If you let it go too far, then the cost increases exponentially.
I appreciate your candor on that, and that absolutely makes sense. And I understand. I think I understand a little better about how you guys try to prioritize those decisions. And yes, it does make sense. And I think there's definitely some parallels. Obviously, we're talking about, major interstate system with all kinds of traffic, but there's some parallels, and that makes sense. Appreciate your candor with that one. Vice Mayor, I, as always, appreciate your patience. Thanks for letting me follow up there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a question. I just want to make a comment. A really big thank you to the folks at YDOT. And even though you all mentioned you're in preservation mode, having taken a few road trips over the years, probably more than a few. Generally speaking, you know, our roads in Wyoming are pretty amazing. And I just want to thank you guys for all the work. And I'm always happy to come home to our roads. So thank you.
We appreciate that.
As a timely comment, and I agree with the vice mayor. I think we do that in Wyoming because with our climate and our weather, we have to, right? Why not? If we don't, we'd have some real problems. Councilmember Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. I had a question concerning transition from state to city, and I'm talking about 3rd and Ivinson, 3rd Street, and then you go, say if you're going from the stoplight eastbound and you drop off from 3rd to Ivinson, there's a considerable drop. And I was just wondering, to make it a little smoother transition there, whose responsibility? Is that city or a cooperative effort there? Because that's one specific road I can think of that the transition from state to city is not very good.
And I hope that's something we can catch on that 3rd Street project in 25. Now, I realize that's more of a long-term solution if you're looking for a shorter term. But those tie-ins, I think, you know, like when we redid Grand, I felt a lot of those got a lot better. So hopefully that's what we can catch on our project, I would say.
Yeah, we do have transitions that go back into city streets, right? Because we can't just, and then when we do our curb and gutter, sidewalk, stuff like that, and then we try to fix as many of them transitions as we can as we go through. Now, you know, sometimes grades won't really allow us to do much to them, depending on what the grades of the buildings and the sidewalk and stuff like that are, but we certainly do the best we can when we go through there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. Folks, questions about anything you heard on these upcoming 6 years? Comments or questions? This is always, frankly, one of the most informative meetings, and it's always kind of mixture of anticipation and also anxiety, because of course some of that stuff's going to be pretty disruptive, but it's all badly needed. It's really exciting to hear about the Curtis Street upgrade. And that finally being reconstructed and replaced. You know, it's an important piece of getting around Laramie, just like the new bridge has been. I'll say this as a resident of Albany County, I'm really excited to hear about that stuff west of town and some of those turning lanes, like you talked about for the Hanson Arena, and then off to the Laramie Plains Lakes. That can get a little exciting sometimes with the traffic behind you when you're trying to turn off to go fishing, and it's you got to take a real fast turn to get over there. I'm glad to hear about turning lanes out there. Let's see. I don't see a lot of hands popping up, but if you guys will let me, we'll see if there's a couple of questions from any of the public that might be on the call or here, and we'll see if we get anything there. Okay. And I have a question from. We're going to let Nancy Sindler, I believe. And Nancy, you've got the floor. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to say how awesome it is to hear about all these things going on and how supportive City Council is about bike lanes. I'm hoping as part of either the 3rd Street repaving or the curb and gutter or such, if there's a little tiny connector that has frightened me a couple times, and then I found out there's other folks that are worried about it. Next to 287 south from the interstate, down past the fairgrounds, there's this wonderful little shared use path trail. And then somebody planned in across, except for the Spring Creek Bridge, northbound from about the Spring Creek Bridge, they put in a pathway. But in between, from under the interstate to this Spring Creek Bridge, it's gravel. It has a good drainage. It's real hard packed. I was hoping the next time you get paving down in that neighborhood, you could put about a 3-inch lift of asphalt on that, If you hit it on a skinny tired bicycle, it's frightening. If you try to drop off into this roadway, you are now riding into traffic, which is against the law. And I've also been talking to people I'm working with Age Friendly Laramie and other groups, and there are people that live south of town, down south of the interstate, that don't drive. And sometimes they are pushing baby strollers with small wheels, and that gravel it's hard on the kid and it's hard on the stroller. So I was wondering, it's just a few hundred feet long. If you ever have a chance to have a little bit of pavement, little asphalt left over, could you put it down there, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. I think that was kind of more of an advisory, and I'm not sure. It seems like one of the things that working together on these projects, we might be able to find the time and the place to do that. And I think it was a good suggestion. Let's see if we have other comment. Got quite a few folks here, but we've got a couple of major work session topics tonight. Any other comments, questions for the YDOT projects? Okay, we'll go ahead and close that. Council members, anything else you'd like to touch on before we close this part of the work session? Very interesting. Thank you folks very much for that thorough presentation. And for members of the public or maybe the news reporter folks, those slides will be available on the city's agenda center as an attachment for tonight's work session agenda, correct, City Clerk? Okay, so if you needed to look at those again, because there was a lot of information, those will all be available. And I just want to thank you again for your presentation and your time with us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for your input. We really do appreciate the input that you all gave to us, and we'll take them all under advisement and get some answers back to you.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll close that work session topic, and that'll get us to the next one. And I don't know who's leading us off on this one, but this is about our efforts and the ongoing efforts for the County Mental Health Board, and where we're at with a lot of the things we're talking about there. So this is the work session for the Mental Health Calls for Service update from Albany County Mental Health Board. And again, I'm not quite certain. City Manager Jordan, okay, thank you. And then I see we've got other folks. Great, thank you, everybody. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to have the Mental Health Board here, and particularly in front of City Council, but also with the Board of Commissioners. So that's great. Let me give a little bit of background, Commissioners. Some of this is city-specific, but I think informative as to why I had asked the Mental Health Chair and Vice Chair to come present to our group tonight. So as you know, the City of Laramie has kind of been a focal point for the community, along with the police department, over the last probably 2.5 years for voices that are seeking alternative and possibly better ways of serving folks in our community that are in mental health crisis. So with that in mind, the City Council on March 23rd of this year adopted a resolution with 3 public policy objectives. And one of those, number 1, related to those mental health calls for service. And in fact, said that staff would be directing staff to implement an alternative response model that involves mental health related calls. And then provided for some subsequent data collection and evaluation to see, after implementation of some different kinds of response models, how effective those might be. So this work session tonight is designed to be an update kind of on the heels of this dialogue we've been having for 2.5 years surrounding how we respond to calls for service for mental health. So I reached out to our Albany County Mental Health Board chairperson currently, who is Kristen Cavello, and also to Kristen also, I should say, is the Albany County VOA Clinic Director and Vice Chairperson. And then director, and then I reached out as well to the vice chairperson of your mental health board, which is Kurt Britzius, the Albany County attorney currently. I met with them and also city council member Sharon Cumby, and we talked about what we thought would be a reasonable status update for our governing bodies about the progress of this committee toward that notion of how do we as a community respond differently to mental health calls for service. The short update is there has been a subcommittee formed by the Mental Health Committee, and they're going to tell you a little bit about the work in progress of that subcommittee. By way of history, I wanted to mention to you that this mental health board was formed in 2017, so it's a relative newcomer to our board and commission structure, and particularly to our board and commission structure where we have shared boards between the city and county. Since the inception of this board in 2017, the City of Laramie's police chief has been serving on the board, Dale Stalder, and he has been the point person for the city in working with this board. So Dale is very knowledgeable as well about what has progressed up to current time, and he is on the call, and he may want to participate also. So with that, I would introduce I guess first I would say, are there any questions for me? And if not, then I would introduce Kristen Cabello and Kurt Britzius, and I believe some other members that they may have joining them from the Mental Health Board.
Fantastic. And yes, some of these folks, of course, the city manager, the council is familiar with. We have Dr. White here, who is, of course, extremely helpful on our advisory board that helped with those recommendations. Welcome. And Director Cabello, our county attorney, thank you all for being here, Chief Stalder. So as the city manager has invited whoever wants to kick something off here, the floor is yours. Great to have this update now, timely and of interest.
Wonderful.
Cabello? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We appreciate it. Would someone mind bringing up the PowerPoint, please? So several of us are going to be speaking this evening. We welcome the opportunity to be able to talk about the Albany County Mental Health Board. As noted, I'm the chair, and Kurt is the co-chair with me. Dale was the chair up until December, January, when we made a transition. So I'll look for Dale, Claire, and Kurt to comment as we go through. So I want to provide some background in that. We can move to the next slide, please. Give some background on our subcommittees. So this board meets usually every 6 weeks in terms of that's open for the public to attend. We welcome attendance and involvement, and then we have subcommittees that also meet. So I want to touch on each of those 4 subcommittees just to help provide everyone with a better understanding of the complexity of what our subcommittees are doing. Several of us that are on this call are involved in each of those subcommittees. So we've donated additional time to focus on those different subcommittees to help support. So the first one on the next slide is on our bylaws. And so Kurt is leading this. We're working on revising and updating these bylaws so that they are updated regarding members that we have in attendance. And we're also working to add a city council member to it as well. I'll open it up if Kurt, you have anything that you want to add.
Thank you, Kristen. And I believe we're about done revising the bylaws at this point, and Commissioner Gosard would know better, but I believe they've been ratified at this point. We do have a provision that allows a city council member to be a liaison to the mental health board. So I believe that's going to be brought before the city council very shortly.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kurt. I appreciate it. If we could move to the next slide. We have then the Gatekeeping Subcommittee. This is with a contract that we have with the county and VOA. So I have a case manager who runs our gatekeeping program. We have currently to date 25 clients that are in this program. So when clients are detained or voluntarily admitted up to BHS, BHS helps kind of signal and flag everyone else on the team about if we need to move a client in gatekeeping to have additional wraparound. When clients are moved into this program, they are in there for up to 2 years. And so that means that they work very closely with our gatekeeper, Heather, who is up at BHS at least 3 times a week for treatment team meetings and is heavily involved in then supporting the client as they re-enter into the community Or also if they're placed outside of our community, she stays in contact with them so that we can help support them as they return to the community, whether they're at the state hospital, at a group home, etc., to help provide that support to them. She's been on the road quite a bit, back and forth to Evanston and Sheridan, myself included, to help support some of our gatekeeping clients that have had some struggles. So our goal is to try to keep them removed from the hospital as much as possible, however, knowing that sometimes we have some of those struggles. So what our team has been able to do is that we ran into some issues knowing that some of our clients don't necessarily always like being in the program or being actively engaged. And so what was neat is that in January, we had a gatekeeping meeting and we're able to problem solve and over lunch determine that we could have status conferences with clients instead of bringing them all the way back into fully into a court or revoking them. We could go ahead and have a status conference to update them on what they need to do in terms of that gatekeeping program. That to me is a direct result of the entire team working together. So it's certainly that collaborative effort with VOA, County Attorney's Office, BHS. Jennifer Stone usually serves as the attorney for the clients, and LPD and Sheriff's Department have been heavily involved in supporting us as well. So it's been an excellent collaborative effort, something that I feel like is really neat. It has not always been a smooth process. However, I'd really say over the last year, I sing a lot of praises about this whole situation and that it allows for us to, if there's an issue that comes up, we get on the phone, we schedule a meeting, and we can usually quickly get a meeting going to say, hey, we have a client situation, here's what we need to take care of, and everyone is able to have their voice at the table as well to figure out what we need to have happen. In fact, I called Chief Stalder about a year or so ago and had noted that we were running into some problems with needing some support on some welfare checks on some clients, and would he be able to have an officer come and be a part of that with us? Within 24 hours, he had a policy in place. That to me is phenomenal, and that's not something you can always find in other communities. Something that Heather does as well is that she also provides quarterly reports that are submitted to the county attorney for the court every 3 months on the client's progress. So how are they doing? How many resources have they been connected with? Have they had any contact with the police? Their known address and recommendations that we have for their treatment and how they're doing in the program. She also then provides a quarterly report that is submitted to the Albany County Health Board so that we have that updated with, again, some general stats that are taking place. Chief Stalder, I see your hand is up. Feel free to comment.
Yeah, I just want to point out to council an important part. I mean, the gatekeeping program is a critical piece of what we're doing at the local level to work with people who have mental health crises or mental health issues, especially through Title 25. But the gatekeeping program was actually a model devised by and I guess invented by the Albany County Mental Health Board prior to both Kurt and Kristen's arrival. It was one of the very first things that we did, and there was actually a pilot paid for with a grant prior to when VOA took over it. So if we want to talk about some of the successes of the Albany County Mental Health Board, the gatekeeping program, it is certainly one that came from within that first year. So we're talking 2018 to 2019, and it's been an incredibly successful way to reduce recidivism and then track and better assist people in our community with mental health issues. So I just wanted to point that out, that the Albany County Mental Health Board was actually the one in the state of Wyoming who invented the gatekeeping program. Thanks.
Thank you, Chief, for sharing that. I appreciate that, and the history too. Those are key pieces to keep in mind. And another example then of this gatekeeping program and how much time and coordination it takes from all of our members. We had one of our gatekeeping clients who was housed in an apartment in Sheridan with VOA. He went unfortunately off of his medications, was having a lot of struggles up there. And before he got evicted, we wanted to help support him with getting him back into treatment. We then met, problem solved. I took a case manager up to Sheridan. We picked the client up. We had support from the Sheridan Police Department as well, and ensuring that he got loaded up in the vehicle with us. When we stopped at the gas station in Buffalo, we saw a sheriff. I asked them for support if needed as well. And so it really was a collaborative effort. I was on the phone with Kurt's department with both Matt and Jennifer throughout the way on our way back, just to ensure that Nico was ready to go at the hospital, that we had all of our ducks in a row for helping to support getting this client back stabilized. We did need to admit him to BHS for further stabilization. And once he was stabilized, then Heather was able to get him back into a group home level of setting. So again, lots of team support has happened to ensure then that our clients are at the level of care that they need and what additional pieces they need to make those things happen. And that's a direct result of the entire team working together. I'll open it up. Kurt, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I would only echo what Chief Stalder said. The gatekeeping program has been key in the keeping down recidivism. Unfortunately, with the way things work now, and I've been a criminal prosecutor for some time, is the criminal justice system is often how people with mental health issues get into the system. There, under our Title 25 statutes, there's really two identified groups that can Title 25 or involuntarily commit someone. One would be law enforcement, the other would be an examiner. An examiner would be a physician or a psychiatrist, but I would 80, 90, maybe more % of the individuals that get Title 25 are involuntarily committed. It's due to law enforcement, because when they're having a mental health crisis, you know, they can act out. They get called into the police, or the family calls because they're worried about their loved one. And the police are put in a position where they have to make a tough call under our state statutes of whether to involuntarily commit this individual and put him or her through the program of actually getting them committed, or, you know, are they safe to stay where they are? And the standards right now, as the statute stands, are, you know, homicidal ideation, suicidal ideation, substantial risk of injury to themselves or others, or that their mental health condition has put them in a position where they're not able to care for themselves. And once they're put into BHS by law enforcement, within 24 hours, their detention has to be upheld by a physician, which it almost always is. And from there can be hearings and things. But if they either voluntarily or involuntarily enter into the gatekeeping program, it gives them the support they need. Because what often happens with people with mental health issues is the medications the side effects are very harsh. And they can make it a very rational decision not to take them. Once they're off their medications, of course, they exhibit behaviors that, again, lead to law enforcement contact. And you do get into the circle, and I've seen it personally for years. And the gatekeeping program gives those individuals the support they need to maintain on their medications, or if they have a fall, that we can get them help that doesn't involve having the police detain them. Instead, they may have a hearing in front of the judge, the status conference that Kristen talked about, or they simply get taken to their counselor, or, you know, reminded to take their medications. It really has been a great help in stopping that cycle of people being involuntarily committed, stabilized, then they go off their medication, and 6 months later, they're having law enforcement contacts again, which is not good for the individual or the community. So it really has been a massive success.
Thank you, Kurt, for your comments on that. I appreciate it. Our next piece that we have as a subcommittee is our UW gatekeeping. This is one that is a little bit slower moving. This is a good thing in that we don't have a lot of students at UW that are moving into this program. So hopefully they're staying safe. But one of the things that we have done is had some ongoing conversations and look to ramp up more and more on this. One of the things that we are working on right now is MOUs with UW and key agencies to help support students. So we've had a plan in place then too. If a UW student is admitted and detained or voluntarily at BHS, how do we then alert everyone else on the team, gain those releases of information so that we can help provide that wraparound support. That is another thing that we're doing with gatekeeping as well in the general gatekeeping program. Jennifer Stone has been a huge help to us in gaining releases of information so that all the key players are involved, and that includes LPD and Sheriff's Department, so that, again, we can have that wraparound support and have a flow of communication, and that our clients are aware of what's happening, what's going on. So we look forward to in the future months, especially as UW kicks back off in the fall full time, that we can help support that, and again, triage any of those clients and students that are up at BHS, so we can help support them so that they're hopefully not having repeated entry to BHS. Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, council, I would I would just like to point out that this relationship with UW on mental health intervention is relatively new. About a year and a half ago, we made a decision to pull the dean's office into the Albany County Mental Health Board. They're very excited about that, and also to collaborate with the gatekeeping program. And it's a big deal for LPD and the SO to a lesser degree, because oftentimes UW is making a welfare check to law enforcement for students who live off campus. So this is just another alternative crisis response mechanism that we've put into place and is growing over time, over a short period of time. I just wanted to point that out to council.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. That's excellent. This, too, our conversation is an example of what our meetings look like as well on our subcommittees. It's everyone coming together, getting to have that voice and being able to collaborate. That has not always necessarily been the case that we've had, and so we've all worked very hard for those pieces to happen. That is something too that I repeatedly talk about in our community, is that when I, as a VOA, coming in and talking about mental health, I don't have to be the one to start these conversations with people, which is really refreshing for me. I don't have to be the one to say, okay, let's turn to mental health. In fact, when I first met with Chief Stalder a little over 2 years ago, he was the one who brought mental health up into the conversation. And I was very appreciative of that. That's not something that you can see in every community. Usually as a mental health professional, I'm happy to come in, bring those conversations up and break that ice. However, we live in a great community that is willing to have those conversations. So if we can move to the next slide, please. We'll now talk about our fourth subcommittee of the alternative crisis response. Claire's going to share in a minute about some of the research and work that she is doing. Again, this is a subgroup, so we meet on a regular basis then to meet and discuss where we're at on different pieces. When Chief Stalder and I met 2 years ago and he brought up mental health, I of course jumped to talking about mental health first aid training and visiting more about those pieces. So he was patient with me for over 18 months as I tried to get done with the trainings. If anyone's familiar with mental health first aid, it is a process to get the training number one, to be an adult trainer. Then you have to give trainings before you can even do the public safety version of it. And so it was quite a process for me to get kicked off on all those things. Chief Stalder and Sheriff Abdelhans were very patient with me throughout that process. We had the opportunity to secure some funding from the county, some prevention grant money from Tracy Young. And it was perfect timing that actually came up during one of, I believe it was our mental health board meeting, that it came up and she said, hey, I have funding available that needs to be spent by the end of the fiscal year. So it was perfect timing. We were able in June to have 3 mental health first aid trainings for public safety. So Chief Stalder has been a huge supporter of this. He had several of his officers go through the training. We also had UW police officers in there, as well as the Sheriff's Department. So we had a whole variety that were able to go through those 3 trainings. It was a day-long training. In fact, if Robert Terry is on and he has anything that he wants to comment on, I would certainly welcome that. He attended our last training that we had, and I'd welcome any thoughts that he had about going through that training. Chief Stalder also collected some feedback from the officers as well. This is a program training, and so we didn't always have a lot of freedom with what we could discuss or not discuss in it. Or what material we had to go through, but it led to some great conversations. Because I want to note in particular that mental health first aid focuses not only on what we do as mental health first aiders, so anybody in the community who's receiving that training, but they also go into self-care. And so in particular with the public safety training, we really focused on how does the officer take care of themselves and what are some of the risks that they have themselves from what they're facing. And so as we know, when we talk about alternative crisis response, we've got to help protect our community, the clients, and also our officers that are first responders that are working through a number of these different crises. I see we have a hand up for a question. We'll pause.
Yeah, thanks. This is mostly for Chief Stalder. My question is regarding our LPD. What percentage of our LPD has had the CIT training? I know that we've talked about this before, and so if you could just remind me where LPD is on that percentage, or roughly that percentage, if you have it off the top of your head.
Council Chair, we just had another CIT training in January, and I think we're up to about 26% for guys that are CIT trained, which is above the national standard of 20%. And what Kristen talked about with mental health first aid, it's a much shorter training. It doesn't involve the scenarios, but it talks about the same concepts of identification of mental illness, de-escalation, how to interact. So I mandated when I started working with Kristen a year and a half ago that all of our non-CIT trained personnel would have mental health first aid. And then we've also put in place, once that's accomplished, which is actually happening a lot faster than I thought it would. I was expecting 18 months. I think we're going to be closer to 12 months to get all of my staff, and that includes not just sworn, but support and dispatch personnel trained in mental health first aid, that we have a plan in place to do training when we bring on new people. So about 26% CIT trained, all non-CIT trained people will go through mental health first aid.
Great, thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. Hey, we had a great turnout, great involvement as well. So circling to the CIT training, I had the opportunity to work with Ralph in January. I was with him for about 2.5 days of the week-long training regarding CIT. So particularly I did a couple of presentations, but then I was also with them for the role playing. I really want to share that I was very impressed from start to finish with the level of compassion and empathy displayed by the officers that were in the training. Certainly the officers that had been in the field for a longer period of time really had a solid set of skills that they were bringing into the training. There wasn't chips on their shoulders or anything like that. They were ready to be in there and to work. And to me, that was excellent for some of the officers who have not been in the field as long to be able to see that, to see the level of skill that was walking into the room, and that they were willing to have those open discussions. That was a great way to build a relationship with them as well. And that's why in particular, I provided the mental health first aid trainings. Something else that we did is that Dale, as he does on a regular basis, reviews different cases. And so Dale and I will visit about any problems that come up regarding our two teams and communication and support that needs to happen. And as a result, he was able to identify that the officers needed to know more about our gatekeeping program. So as a result of that, I attended roll call meetings to help talk about the services that we provide at VOA. And as part of our mental health first aid training, we talk about the services that we provide at VOA. I had another trainer from UW, Julio, that joined and was able to talk about services at UW as well. And so those trainings provide, hey, let's talk about some of the local community resources so that everyone's aware of what they have access to. So we're really building a foundation then for if there's a crisis, who can you reach out to for that support to help wrap around. So here in a minute, I'm going to turn over to Claire for her to talk about her research and work, and then I will circle back to talking about a grant that VOA has submitted for back in May regarding crisis response. We move to the next slide, please.
Okay, well, thank you for the nice introduction, Kristen. I'm going to just talk kind of about my role on the Albany County Mental Health Board as well as the subcommittee. I came to UW about four years ago and have been doing research on mental health responses by police officers for quite a few years. My work previously was in Baltimore. So when we think about research, it can take a long time, and that has already been experienced in terms of Dale and I have had a data sharing agreement put together about a year ago, and we're still waiting on data. So there is that element that I understand wanting to move quickly, and that there's a lot of discussion around these issues, and it's a national discussion. I liked Kurt's kind of how we contextualize this issue is going on all over the country as to what responses we can develop for people in mental health crises. So having that body of work is bringing research into our discussion and program development, knowing what's going on in other communities. I'm conducting a national survey on what law enforcement agencies are doing in these areas to get a better sense of, we have 18,000 agencies in this country, and I'll note that only 17% have CIT training, which I still find really shocking. So even just having that training, having that above that 20% kind of recommendation there's a lot being done in Laramie that I think we should be proud of. And when thinking about the gatekeeping program, we have an element of co-response. So that's what a lot of us are talking about, right? Is this co-responder, mental health professional responding to a crisis with a police officer, but that can look very different across the country. And in a lot of places, they're being creative and innovative, like with our gatekeeping program, to bring in that law enforcement and clinical response. Where we bring it in at the front end with a crisis, that's what's moving forward, right? What is our need for that? And having the data from Laramie PD to get an understanding of the scope of these crises. When are we going to have a team out? So working with Fort Collins has had a co-responder team for about 4 or 5 years, and you start with one team and now they're up to 4, and they're partnering with UC Health. So they've been really helpful in kind of informing us on their process. They're very data driven as well, and also working with Cheyenne to develop something similar. So being able to understand, what the needs are of the community, how are we going to assess these outcomes that we're interested in for if something's working. We may not have a lot of numbers in terms of data to really see an impact in terms of mental health calls going down, right? We may not have a whole lot to see a steep decline, but getting feedback from officers, getting feedback from the community, clients that are going through these programs, that's where we can try and assess, the effectiveness of these different programs. And I attended the mental health first aid training and have administered quite a few surveys with the Laramie PD and the Albany County Sheriffs to get some baseline kind of their views around a number of issues in terms of perceptions and kind of these stigmas we have around people with mental illness, as well as their needs as officers, scenario-based questions that then, in a year or two, when we have a program up and running or something has been established, we can redo those surveys and look for change. And I've also grants. There is going to be a lot of grant money going into developing these alternative crisis responses from the federal level. BJA and National Institute of Justice are both going to be putting grants out in these areas that will also speak to rural areas where the availability of mental health professionals and hospitals and residential treatment can look very different than an urban area. And having that data, having these discussions, these partnerships building already will make it a lot easier to pursue those grants because they ask for data, they ask for evaluation, they want to know the scope of the problem, they want to know what partnerships are being developed, and those actions are being taken. So that's kind of my contribution as to hope to speak on the what's being done and how can we develop a smart program that we can evaluate. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Claire. I appreciate it. I also want to note to everyone that Claire has given up a lot of her own personal time to join for some things. In particular, when she collected that data in Cheyenne, she joined us for part of our mental health first aid training there. And then she sat through 2 days of listening to me and a co-trainer here in Laramie in June to go through the mental health first aid training, so that she is certified as a mental health first aider as well, and then was there to help build relationships as well. This is a key piece that each of us have contributed our time and energy to wanting to build those relationships and to build those hands-on with officers, with other mental health professionals, to build that connection so that we're building that base to work off of. To me, that's a really key thing there, so that, as we know, in order to be successful, we've got to be all working together to achieve that. In addition, Nico and I at the hospital have met with the ER department too to talk more about gatekeeping. They had noted that they'd like some additional help regarding safety planning. And so Rachel and Nico were working on providing some training for them on that as well. So we are working on a number of different fronts to try to help get everything laid out. I do want to note, as I shared before, that VOA has submitted for a grant. I helped write and support in submitting for us to become a certified behavioral health center. As part of that, it's a SAMHSA grant. If we receive that grant, we'll have funding then for 4 years to work towards building into 9 different areas. One of those areas is mobile crisis. And so keeping in mind that we're looking at all 4 counties, so Goshen County, Platte, Laramie, and Albany County receiving funding then for that mobile crisis piece. So we'd be looking at building in with therapists and paraprofessionals to help support with that. As I'm sure you're all well aware of, we have a shortage when it comes to healthcare providers and mental health providers. And so we're really having to look at how do we help gain support from paraprofessionals as well? How do we train up to respond to these crises? With this, though, we also want to note, in case you're not aware, since we have merged with VOA, and even before we did when we were Peak Wellness Center, we have 24-hour support for our clients. So anybody in the community can reach out to it as well to call our mainline number, and they can then get connected with our Alpha page if it's after hours. If it's during the day, we have on-call case managers that triage those cases, whether it's a walk-in crisis or it's something that we need to provide via telehealth. Within all 4 of our counties, we have worked together collaboratively to provide that crisis support. After hours, we have 2 therapists that are on call over our 4 counties, and they respond to calls in those crises. So one of the things that I've done in my roll calls with LPD, and I talked about this in our mental health first aid training, is please call in, give us information, let us know what's going on, let us see how we can help support and what's happening and what's taking place. In fact, the LPD called us recently. We were able to fortunately have time to send out a case manager to be able to help support with getting a client transitioned into the hospital. So again, it's things like that that take some time in building those relationships, making those connections, and for us to get that word out about the support that we can provide around those different pieces. Again, we're excited about this grant. We'll find out then sometime in September if we're receiving it. We hope to. If not, we'll be circling back to it, because the goal is for us to become a certified behavioral health center. And again, one of those 9 aspects that we have to deliver on is mobile crisis. Go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, I just also wanted to note that I've also started to reach out to more faculty in different departments at the university to bring up these discussions with students as well that may be interested in this line of work. This need for co-responders is all over the country. That's a question I get from agencies is, we need help finding co-responders. I said, everyone else, you and everyone else. So starting to, look for the students that are passionate about mental health, about the criminal justice system, both in the psych department as well as the social work. So, having those discussions that we can hopefully maybe bring in other partners to develop and implement these programs. If it can mean master's students can, use the program to gain clinical hours and things like that.
Thanks, Claire. I appreciate that. Again, something I really want to note is that all of us that are on this meeting tonight from the Mental Health Board, as well as several other members, again, have been very committed to making this process happen. I'm sure it sounds like at times like we're not making as much progress as everyone would like. I know that we'd all like to make quicker progress with things, but we have been very intentional about the steps that we have taken in laying the groundwork to get us started on these pieces. I just roughly pulled up, and it's not an exact number because I didn't have a chance to go into the system, but we had nearly 50 LPD officers that joined for the mental health first aid trainings over the those 3 trainings in June. So again, huge shout out to Chief Stalder for that continued support. I know that anyone that's on the mental health board that's on any of these subcommittees, I can call them up regarding questions or concerns that we have or any issues. And I hope that they have that same feeling with me as well, that we can go directly to one another and problem solve what's happening. If we do have a crisis situation, we've been able to respond to things, not fully as a mobile crisis, but have been able to coordinate a lot of services. And we've been grateful for that. Pat?
Thank you, Kristen. I can tell that the program, in light of your presentation, is in good shape. I appreciate your report here tonight. And you talked about a little bit, my question concerns, and you hear about it all across the nation, the lack of support, professional support. The demand sometimes is overwhelming. I was just curious, here in this area, Albany County, are you able to handle the situation pretty well? Are you sometimes overwhelmed, or how does that stand?
I appreciate that, Pat. Right now, we've been able to manage the crisis situations that we have. We also tap into our Serenity Place Crisis Center in Cheyenne if needed as well. So given the fact that we don't have a crisis center here for adults, we have been able to access our Serenity Place for stabilization if needed at times, or I've been able to coordinate, hey, they need to go to the hospital and stabilize, and then we can get them transported over to Serenity Place. That's not to say that everything always works smoothly or that we couldn't use additional support. Right now, I have 3 full-time therapists, and I'm down a therapist. So I'm looking to hire for that 4th one. I do have, as of tomorrow, 5 full-time case managers, and we've really built up that case management support. So when I spoke earlier about our daytime, we have case managers that are helping to support with that on-call. That has been something that we have had to expand into because we don't have the licensed professionals to be able to cover across all 4 of our counties. And so our case managers have really stepped up. They triage and work with clients because sometimes what a client believes is a crisis or what may present as a crisis once we start visiting may not truly be a crisis that we need to elevate to the level of a Title 25 or voluntary placement or even crisis placement. Sometimes it's being able to process and talk through what's happening and going on. So our case managers are able to triage on some of that, and then they can escalate to the level of needing a therapist to get involved if needed on that. Dale?
Yeah, Councilor Gabriel, to your question, one of the things that makes Wyoming unique and difficult is that in different areas of Wyoming, because of the rural nature, that you don't have a lot of the services that we are fortunate to have in Laramie and Albany County. IMH has 8 beds at BHS, 2 of which 2 additional ones reserved for juveniles. So what I believe has happened over the last 3 to 4 years, especially because of the gatekeeping program, is we're able to have a turnover up there where we have available beds for crisis intervention. So I think the gatekeeping program has been critical in preserving that capability to continue to deliver service to that population that we need to interact with. I hope that answers a little bit more.
Very good. Yes. Thanks to both of you.
Most welcome. I'll look first to any of the other members that are joining me tonight for the presentation to add in additional comments, and then we can open up for questions.
Yeah, one other point I want to make is that, you know, with a lot of, when we have a public pressure to develop programs, you can rush into things, and we don't always recognize that these programs may have harm to them as well. So that's a really important, is everything can sound really good, you know, sending a mental health professional with a police officer, but there's a lot of complications in terms of power dynamic, authority, mental health professionals risking their license in certain scenarios. So we have to, that's where that evaluation is important, to make sure that we're not creating more harm to the community, to our police officers, to people that are responding to these crises. And that's all I have to say.
point. Thank you, Claire.
Director Cavello, does that bring you to the end of your presentation?
Yes, it does. Unless
Thank
Kurt
you.
or Dale have anything else that they'd like to add.
I don't have anything further.
I'm good unless there's questions.
Great. And of course, there probably will be. We really appreciate that presentation. That's informative. And I will say, I think there is an appreciation for the need to be deliberate and to be thoughtful and, as you say, intentional about the way you approach this and building up the research behind it before a program is implemented. Of course, at the same time, I believe we all realize that in no way means that there's less demand, less importance, or less urgency. It's just the unfortunate reality of the situation that we find ourselves in. Trying to take these questions in order as best I can. And I think we had Councilor Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor, very much. I appreciate the presentation. I think it's really good work that's going on. I think Albany County's been ahead in a lot of veins, more so than other places that I won't name. And I want to keep that momentum moving forward. Certainly, law enforcement and mental health response has been the topic in the community for at least the last 18 months, probably longer than that. And so there certainly is a demand from the constituents here to continue to move that forward and to improve it. So I guess my first question is around, I do appreciate the need to really be thoughtful and deliberate, but I think at times, especially as governmental entities, we can push that way past the point of being thoughtful and deliberate to put together a good program. What are your thoughts around moving some pieces forward while we wait on like the CCBHC grant or other pieces to develop, like doing something like Jackson did, which is Jackson is currently advertising for their first law enforcement social worker they're going to add to the department. Moving forward with some improved access, and maybe that means more funding for an entity or whatever, but improved access and ease for law enforcement officers to be able to get information or consult with mental health professionals as they're moving forward. Or potentially even looking at some of the early pieces of the Fort Collins model. What are your thoughts around going ahead and moving forward with those pieces that are evidence-based, that are modeled, that have been deployed in areas of the country?
I can speak into that first.
Well, that's what I'd like to try to figure out, Director Cavello. Councilor Somerville, who did you want to direct that question to? Any and all?
Any and all is fine.
Okay. All right.
Wonderful. Yeah, because I'd like. Go for it, Dale.
Chief Stalder, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Chief.
Councilor Somerville and members of the council, one of the pieces that is intriguing to us in following the Fort Collins mental health response team model is that Fort Collins PD has 24-hour access to UC Health's mental health database. And that's the path that we're kind of walking down, knowing that we can't always have a mental health professional on board. I'm not familiar with Teton County or Jackson, but I think we're talking something entirely different than a social worker here, which we work closely with DFS already. So the path that we are walking down is looking at that collaboration between UC Health and Fort Collins PD to access that data, which is in place there, and Dr. White is gaining that data here since IMH is involved with UC Health. So we're still walking down a fairly new path, but I do believe that we're not far from some jumps into that arena that you're discussing.
Mayor, can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
Chief, what exactly would be needed to support that? Is it a funding issue to make software work? Is it personnel? What is that?
No, Councilor Somerville, I think that the database exists at this time. We're not utilizing it in the same shared way that Fort Collins PD and UC Health out of Fort Collins is using it. We just haven't turned that on. But as Dr. White has told you, that's who we're working with, and she's working directly with the mental health professional providers down in Fort Collins to set that up. So the leap is short if that's where we go. As you've heard tonight, our challenge is often having mental health professionals to respond in that collaborative co-responder model here. And you've also heard Claire talk about, or not Claire, but Kristen talk about the overall shortage of mental health professionals in the state and certainly in the community. And Dr. White's trying to address that through her outreach at UW. So we're trying to build those bridges at every different angle. We certainly understand them and want to make it happen.
Yeah, I'll note that. So the UC Health just last year started really buying into with all the with Fort Collins PD, and that is where they have a program called EPIC, and that is their health database, and they have built in a co-responder database that have the clinician has access to, and the law enforcement that just started rolling out this year. So they're just starting to collect more data on, every step that an individual has with law enforcement or a mental health professional or any organization in the community. It's pretty in depth. So yeah, all these pieces are moving, and we're right there in it. Cheyenne has been looking for a co-responder since April and has not had any luck hiring anyone yet. So just that challenge of when are the crises? That's why we need to look at the data, because a lot of mental health professionals, they want to work 8 to 5. And that's oftentimes not when the crises are occurring. So this is a new, it's a new area for the mental health professionals as well to say, oh, this is a job. I can go work with law enforcement. And jurisdictions are passing legislation that's requiring co-responder models. Then it gets to the Attorney General, right? And there's problems with people being able to ride with the officer during and access to the legal information and access to a radio and access to criminal records. So everywhere in the country is kind of having these same discussions. So I think we're right there in it, and we're making the right steps to move forward.
Absolutely. I definitely echo what has been said already, and really want to stress that in terms of the mental health professionals. That's been an ongoing challenge that we have, is finding mental health professionals that are willing to work outside of those hours of 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Thankfully, we have a great team of therapists who are willing to do that on-call. That on-call is remote that they do because they serve all 4 counties. So we have that support that we have right now. And again, I can't stress enough too, we're looking at pulling in those paraprofessionals. So peer specialists to come in, case managers that can help provide that face-to-face support. And then again, when we're talking about the resources, it's funding for things, not only for personnel and for their benefits, but also looking at tablets then for them to have, laptops as well. So technology that they can access and be able then to have that connection with a therapist. So the therapist might be providing that support via telehealth if it elevates to that level of needing them, not always having them face-to-face in each community. Because as we know, we have challenges and openings in nearly every one of our counties right now for therapists, let alone then expanding that to after hours.
Councilor Somerville, follow up.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I appreciate that discussion. I just want to continue to encourage the group to move forward with the pieces. I know that we're waiting on a grand announcement, maybe from VOA, which would be huge in a lot of respects and would certainly propel this forward significantly. But I know there's additional funding opportunities as was described. I don't think funding is our challenge right now. I think it's figuring out which pieces we want to put in the field and actually just start putting pieces in the field. So I think it's really important to encourage that development in the short term, even if it's small pieces, so we can continue to make forward momentum. My heart always goes out to the people that are experiencing mental health crisis in our community right now. They can't afford for us to wait. So I think it's incumbent on us to do everything that we can do and continue to improve that now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Somerville. And we have a lot of hands up. Ms. Camello, I do want to ask a follow-up to that line of questioning, though, because you anticipated a question that I was going to have, and that was about the role for the paraprofessionals. And I think that seems to be emerging a very important piece of this discussion and the way we're going to move forward. And if you can, would you just address for me the type of training and certification, and that this was partially touched on, of course, in the presentation, but the training and certification requirements for those folks. And I ask that question now because, as I say, that seems to be a critical piece of this rolling out in a near-term fashion.
Absolutely. So right now what we are geared up to with our case managers is that they go through a 2-day assist training for suicide prevention along with the mental health first aid training. So they go through similarly to what our public safety training is. It's just one geared towards adults or towards youth that they go through. We've provided as clinic directors additional training to case managers. They work together in a team as well, so then they can reach out for that support. And then in addition, they receive regular and ongoing supervision, whether that's in a group setting or individually. And during the day, my case managers, for example, here in Albany County, have direct access to me throughout the day, whether that's in sending me Teams messages, or they know if it's an immediate crisis, they can call my cell phone to get a hold of me immediately for that consultation and next steps with things, so that they can triage and receive that support and that guidance and check in with different steps that they're taking. Again, if we receive that grant, we'll look to continue to expand those trainings as well. There's a number of Reliance trainings that they take as well online.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Councilmember Cumbie, I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for the presentation and the wealth of information that you've provided. And I think that one of the greatest barriers to implementing seamless mental health services within a community is when walls have been built that keep agencies from adequately interacting with one another. And I think that's pretty amazing what the Mental Health Board has accomplished in 4 years. That within 1 year, there's the Gatekeeper program. Within 4 years, there's 50 law enforcement personnel learning mental health first aid. And that's major. But I think one of the most major things is the collaboration that I'm hearing and seeing between and among you all, and that you continue to reach out and pull other members in, so that I think the potential is great to develop a seamless system because of the breakdown of silos and the working together. So I really appreciate that. And having worked in mental health for a very long time, it's a very hard thing to do. And in my work, it's one of the greatest barriers that I encountered was knowing who to reach out to when working with clients. So I just wanted to thank you. I do look forward to moving forward. I feel that we're already doing that and accelerating. And I just thank you very much.
Councilmember, thank you, Councilmember Cumbie, very much for those comments. Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not exactly sure who this is going to be directed at just off the top, and I apologize for that. And I think maybe just as a start, I do really appreciate, the other council members have said it as well, but all of your, service to the residents of Laramie, Albany County, and beyond. And certainly your work on this board. I think that is something we all are appreciative of, and know how much it takes from your personal lives. I'm curious how, so the Gatekeeper program obviously has been wildly successful. I think by all metrics, that is something that you all should be proud of, that the council is proud of. City of Laramie, the LPD, everyone involved is proud of that program. And, I guess I am willing to wait for that sort of spark to come from this mental health board. I think you all have demonstrated an ability to put forward projects and programs that are worth waiting for. You all have demonstrated that you are successful at this and thoughtful. And obviously you all are far more competent in this world than I am. I think one of the things that frustrates me with government in general, this has been sort of a battle that I wage within myself all the time, is the speed of government. And I sort of reconcile that with it is stable. It's reliable. And I oftentimes battle between those things of wanting to do these things quickly. And then also struggling with it, that doing them right may take time. So, given that, I'm curious when we can expect as a council, when I think our constituents are, I know the first phone call I'm going to get is, yeah, but when is something tangible happening? So I'm curious if any of you want to take a crack at estimating into the future here, and maybe you don't, but for when we might expect something tangible, like when we are going to start to see, as Councilor Somerville said, these pieces, on the ground. When are we going to start to see things come before us that are, I guess tangible would be the word for it. So I'm going to leave it there. And then, Mr. Mayor, I do have one other unrelated question, but I can wait for a second round if you'd prefer.
I think we'll do them. We'll do them all at once. And I see that Chief Stalder's first up. And I want to say I think there is recognition by other council that there are tangible things in place that are happening. I think Councilor Harrington, not to put words in your mouth, but I think you're talking about some of the things that have been mentioned as upcoming. When do we might see those starting to unfold, right?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's correct.
Chief Stalder, you had your hand up first. I'm gonna go to you, then I'll go to Ms. Cavilla.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilor Harrington, I was going to point out the same thing, is that we have made tangible changes over the last 5 years. And in addition to the Gatekeeper program, which I will reiterate was the brainchild of the Mental Health Board and a model for the state, and is actually gaining funding opportunities. And I think VOA's grant application to expand that is a critical piece. We have done a number of other things. One of the things that has happened in the last 2 years is that, and I'll make this as brief and non-technical as possible, is that this group, the Mental Health Board, has instituted a process where once somebody is detained on a Title 25 detention, there's an expedited safety plan put in place within that first 48 hours that releases them under condition that if they don't follow that safety plan under the Gatekeeper program, that they can be redetained under Title 25. And over the last 2 years, we've actually utilized that process on 3 or 4 different occasions. That's something that in my entire career, which I would add spans a while, had never been done before. So that's another advancement that was another outcome of the Mental Health Board. So these things are tangible. And as I have pointed out before, although they're done a little bit quieter and they're not done with fanfare, they are being done with a collaborative effort by mental health professionals, VOA, IMH, BHS, the county attorney's office, which is a critical, an absolutely critical piece in this entire process. So what I would put forward is there are tangible outcomes. They not be the splash of star or cahoots, but for our community, for our demographics, we have done some really amazing things, and I think that we'll continue to do them. And I would let Dr. White or Kristen jump in, but I can't tell you a timeline for what you indicate as a tangible outcome, because these outcomes come slowly and with research and with thoughtful considerations by people who have a lot of knowledge, background, and experience in these areas. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. I'll add in a piece that in terms of what, well, I guess I want to highlight too, when we're talking about what we're already doing, is that we do have after hours on call. So we have some crisis response that we're already providing. Now, granted, that's online. I get that that's not in person, but clients in our community, whether they're a client or a non-client, have access. And we have clients and non-clients that walk into our clinic as well, and we provide that after hours too. So I really want that to be clear to the community that it's not like outside of the hours of 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, that we're not providing anything to the community. We have that, and we have that provided in each of our 4 counties, and have access to that. And that's why, again, in the mental health first aid trainings, we've really pushed with officers to call us. We can help provide some of that support. And I've noted, while I can't always pull someone to immediately be there, we can help provide some of that coordination. They can always share information with us. We can't always confirm or deny if somebody's a client if we don't have a release of information, but we can collect that information and have some of that follow up in those next steps as well. So I want to highlight that it's not that we don't have anything within our community. It's building in what is more of this alternative crisis and mobile response look like in person that we're building towards. If we were to get the SAMHSA grant with VOA, our build-in would be within a year to have mobile crisis up and running in each of our 4 counties. So again, I do want to highlight and stress, while I know that we're all biased because we're here in Albany County, we fight hard for what we have here. We do have this grant. If we receive it, will be for all 4 counties. And so we will have a build-in across that with getting that up and running. So we would be looking at a year from September for that being up and operational fully. We would look to start hiring immediately and training. Again, I want to be honest, what we're going to run into is some of our barriers is, again, finding people that want to have that crisis intervention, that want to be a part of that team and want to fulfill that role. So we'll be marketing that heavily.
And getting the officers trained is huge. I mean, that is a very, that when we are, you know, the next steps we could probably look at are, you know, the legality and the of having someone in the car, these kind of legal issues, access to police radios. But the officers, they're getting the training that's going to help them be prepared to partner with a mental health professional to understand what a mental health professional does more than they did before. So the officers on that side are going to be more prepared to be a better crisis response. And I encourage my community, I encourage the community, I encourage my students that if they have a crisis, to even ask for a CIT officer. You know, that's an important you know, training that can be helpful. And co-responder models are not evidence-based. There's very, very little research on co-responder teams.
I want to thank all 3 of you for that. And I want to say too, I think part of the challenge here for us, you know, city council folks, is we feel, of course, a need to communicate back to constituents. The concerns are, of course, being heard, and things are happening at all the time and have for years to address these issues. And one of the challenges in that type of communication is we, frankly, as you are all aware, we live in an era of soundbite communication, and not everything translates well. The type of detailed, complicated, multi-layered policy work that what we're discussing with this topic tonight involves does not translate well to soundbite communication to say, you bet, let me give you a bullet point of how these things are being addressed. And I think that's part of the challenge in the community discussion that goes beyond this meeting tonight. and just bubbles out into the community at large. So I really appreciate your efforts here to highlight for us those things that are happening in the here and the now, and we'll do our best to try to communicate that out to folks. And Director Covello, I do want to tag into that part of the discussion here right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I want to highlight too to the board that a VOA submitted a press release, released that in conjunction with Chief Stalder regarding the mental health first aid trainings. So I would hope that some of that information can get out to our communities. In addition, Jennifer Stone is going to be rolling out, we put together through VOA, but we don't want it coming from VOA, it's coming from the Mental Health Board. Key members of the board provided feedback and quotes for that article as well. And that press release should hopefully be coming out later this week. I know following the CIT training, I had reached out to our local newspaper and asked about doing an article with Chief Stalder on that. And we were turned down. There wasn't enough room that week. All of the attendees on this call tonight to help support with spreading some of that word. I also welcome giving presentations of what it is that we're doing, whether it's the Mental Health Board or VOA, to help educate our community as well. Because I think you nailed it, Paul. Getting that information out there can be tough. And so it takes the community to help educate the community.
Yes, and I think that helps us also present out to the people that live here that things are happening, and there have been, as we keep saying, tangible changes, but it's difficult to figure out the right channels of communication for that. Councilor Harrington, I'd like to give you an opportunity for follow-up. You had some other questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I guess maybe before my next question, I did want to say that I was not intending to downplay the efforts of this board of LPD. I remain proud of both, and I just want to clarify that was specific. And I noted, Dr. White, your last statement about there's no data backing up co-responders. I was asking, I guess, maybe more specifically about a co-responder model, and when our community might see something in that, that sort of avenue. But I think I might have gleaned an answer out of all of that. So my other question was specifically about the Gatekeeper program, and I think I saw on the slide that it was 25 participants, and I was curious if what is the limiting factor on that? Is 25 the need? I mean, is that what we see as sort of the rolling need for the Gatekeeper program, or is that funding provider? What is sort of the limiting factor, or did I misread that slide?
We're at 25 right now. Council Harrington, and that is just for where we're at in terms of who's in the program. We can go up, and we've been up over 30. It's just based on the need that we have that's coming in, based on working with the hospital, and the hospital and BHS NICO's team then flagging clients that we need to move into the gatekeeping program. If we continue to expand and go up over 40, we probably need to re-examine some things and look at how can we help stretch what it is that we're doing. Thankfully, I was able to hire a 5th case manager this spring. I can't always guarantee that I have that ability to grow quickly when we need to on things. Having that 5th case manager has certainly helped provide support with gatekeeping as well. So I have one main case manager that is on that, but my other case managers jump in and help support if, say, she's sick or out on vacation as well.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Mayor. That's all I had.
I'm assuming you're saying Councilmember Schmeckel there, Mayor. We can't hear you.
Yeah, I was muted, and I was trying to say thank you, Councilmember Harrington, and ironically, I was saying communication, always a challenge in all these efforts. Councilmember Schmeckel, thanks for waiting.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor. And I want to say that I want to echo Councilmember Cumby's statements here as well about the impressiveness of the multilateral approach to all of this. I greatly appreciate that. And my question, we've been kind of dancing around it here for a while, and it comes back to that communication. There's marketing of services, but I think we're also in an environment in the state where we need to be marketing our successes in this area as well. I think that there's significant challenges in finding resources for mental health because people don't understand that there are successes out there that we can emulate elsewhere in the state. My question is, what are you doing to market those successes in addition to marketing the services? I mean, when I hear statements like it's dramatically reduced recidivism and things like that, I'm curious if there's policy arguments that could be made with this that we can get out into the narrative and kind of help the rest of the state with Albany County being in the lead.
That sounds like it's another all takers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mayor. I would say just in terms of from the mental health perspective and from VOA, the press releases were something that we wanted to put together to help educate our community. Again, it's mental health first aid trainings, things like that, where we start to have those conversations and educate people within our communities, whether they are as a professional or as a person individually attending some of those trainings to gain understanding and awareness. So starting at some of those pieces, I know that VOA is heavily involved with helping to advocate at the state level and with legislature on a number of different pieces. Dale?
Yeah, Councilor Schmeckel, your question is incredibly insightful, because back in 2018, when the Albany County Mental Health Board brainstormed the idea of the Gatekeeper program, in late 18 and early 19, I went to Cheyenne with then County Attorney Peggy Trent, and we tried to sell the Department of Health on that program, and they were incredibly resistive to the idea. And then you jump forward to 2021, and the discussion in the interim committees with judiciary that controls Title 25 is how to incorporate gatekeeping / case management into Title 25. It was that 2+ year period in there where we couldn't sell it to Department of Health and get funding for it. So Peggy Trent stole money from another grant, legitimately. She didn't steal it, but she moved money from another grant over to do a gatekeeping program. That lasted only about 11 months before that money fell out. And then we had wait another year before Peak Wellness, now VOA, was able to secure that funding from the county to do that. So I guess my response is, we've been trying to tell people all along the good work that the Mental Health Board is doing. And although I'm a part of that, I'm a small part. You have a lot of very brilliant people. You've got attorney advocates on there. You have mental health professionals on there. You have, Kurt in the county attorney's role, which I've already indicated is critical. There are a lot of critical pieces on the Mental Health Board that keep trying to find ways to do good stuff. And we're making progress. And Councilor Harrington, to your question / comment, we're getting there, and it's not simple, like Dr. White said. This is a road, and what I would tell council is that this is a road I've been on not just since 2017 with the Mental Health Board. I have been driving this issue since 2008, and I will continue to drive it because it's necessary in our community. I hope that helps, and I'm sorry for being on a soapbox there.
Chief Stelter, you so rarely get on the soapbox that no apologies needed. I'd like to go over to the commission chambers. I know I have some other hands, folks. City Manager, if you don't mind, I'd like to check over the commission chambers as a page in the conversation. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Commissioner Gosar. I do really have to applaud the leadership of the Mental Health Board. It does take leaders like Chief Stalder and Sheriff Applehands and County Attorney Britz is to make it an emphasis in their department. But I gotta tell you, I also see this world differently in light of some of the comments from Councilor Harrington and Councilor Somerville. These are pieces and they're important pieces. But we have a big road to hoe, right? There's a difference between the Title 25 detention and then what happens the next 2 weeks, right? If somebody is released from Title 25, where do you send a person who's addicted to substances? Those are not answers in our community. And I don't mean to throw cold water on the conversation, I really don't. But I do think we need to have an honest conversation about what we're doing well. And then we all can carry it back to our places of work and homes and say, there are huge gaps. We watched 2 people die of alcoholism at the downtown clinic last summer, less than 40 years old. That's real. There was no placements for those people. That's also real. And so we have to remember that this stuff it's multifaceted, it's a big problem. But I do have a sense of urgency about some of those issues, right? It's great to take your time and do the right thing. But as Councilor Somerville said, there's somebody suffering tonight. And so there is this way that you have to, this responsibility you have to weigh with going too slow and too intentional with helping somebody today and tonight. So I think it's really great, and I don't want to cast any aspersions on anybody on the mental health board. This is a big job, and it's too big for the mental health board. It's a job that the commission and the city council and the hospital need to start rolling into. And so just put my 2 cents in there. So thank you guys on the mental health board. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Commission Chairman Gosar. And that kind of leads me to this question that I'm going to ask. I bet you the city manager will let me ask it, which is this. I agree with those comments. And of course, I fully stand behind what I said earlier, which is that I think we really have seen a lot of movement here, thanks to a lot of leadership from people like Chief Stelter and others over a long period of time, and certainly over the period of the most recent years. And it sounds to me like there is a lot of positive work that is being done and that has been done. But one of the things that I think we've come back to in our conversation, this work session, is that we've got some institutionals and in some cases serious statutory barriers. We talked about Title 25 reform that seems badly needed, and there's some other areas. We know that there's been some discussion about this at the legislative level. I don't think many of us have seen as much improvement as we would have hoped, perhaps, on some of these things. The question that comes to my mind now is what can we do in the local elected official community, the community advocate, stakeholders in this discussion to help make an impact at moving the needle on some of these barriers so that this careful research work and community feedback work that we've heard about now can be put into place. What can we do? How can we focus that energy so that some of those institutional and statutory barriers can be modified, and some of those changes that probably do need to take place? Is that a question of waiting for the research to come through so we can focus those efforts? What can we do now in terms of community leadership and advocacy to help those things that need to be urgently addressed be addressed? And that's an open question for the chief, for Ms. Cabello, for Dr. White, for the county attorney. Where do we need to focus those efforts now so that those barriers aren't causing us even more delay on these, frankly, extremely urgent topics?
I'll kick us off and then I'll look for others to jump in as well. To me would be support, as I talked about. It takes a community to educate a community. So getting that word out there, helping to encourage people to go into this type of work, whether it's mental health or it's in law enforcement, and to do so with that willingness to work across the board. So to help serve the community, what can they do to give back and to be involved in the community, whether that's being a mental health first aider. So a key part of that then is, if, as a certified mental health first aider, you're helping to support and get someone who's in crisis connected. And whether they're in a crisis or they're not in a a crisis. You're talking to them about services that are available within the community. We also need support in helping to hire mental health professionals and paraprofessionals. So encouraging those that are looking at wanting to gain some experience, come and work with us at VOA, help serve the community, be a part of some of those steps, be engaged in the conversations and the resources with us.
Can I ask what outcomes you're looking to achieve in Laramie?
I think what the question I'm trying to get an answer for, or really even just a suggestion, because I don't expect that there's a real clear answer, is what are the most critical barriers right now to remove so that people in our community with these mental health issues that we need to find answers for, people that have these substance abuse issues that we need to find answers for, can be modified so that these folks can have some better outcomes, so that they're not ending up in jail as often, and so that we're not having the recidivism, and so that we're having an increase in positive outcomes for these folks. What are the barriers to that right now that these kinds of alternative response models need to have out of the way? I think that's what I'm trying to see if we can get some suggestions and some guidance on. Because then perhaps we can help advocate for those at the legislative level, et cetera.
Yes, I guess the reason I'm asking is it sounds like the city council already knows what type of program they want to implement. Is that correct? Because it's hard to give guidance as to what we're going to do and when we're going to do it if we don't know what program. If a co-responder team is what we want to do, then we can move forward. If that's where, you know, the people want, the council wants to move forward with that, then we can move forward with that. Our understanding, or my understanding kind of with Albany County Mental Health is letting the community drive what program we develop rather than say, this is what we're going to do. So I think it would be easier for us, or at least for me, to know, like, okay, we're going to go with the co-responder model. That's what Cheyenne's doing. That's what Fort Collins is doing. We're going to do it. And then we make that decision and we put those pieces start in place. And if that's what it sounds like to me, what we want to do.
Well, I think you've just distilled this conversation into something useful and constructive, which is that I'm not certain the community knows enough in terms of what to get behind and say, this is what we want. And so that might be an initial barrier that needs to be removed.
And also start understanding what's being done, because we do have some co-response elements. Co-responder, there's some communities, they call it a co-responder team, but it's just follow-up. They do not go out on crisis calls, but they still call it a co-responder team. So we have to be very clear about what we specifically want. Do we want someone riding with a police officer for a certain amount of time that maybe turns into 24/7 down the road, or do we want follow-up? Those are all different. Those are different programs. So it's just being clear, and that will help, you know, all of us decide what the barriers are, because we don't know what program we're trying to implement yet.
I think this is a really constructive part of this conversation. I do think, unfortunately, there's a little bit of chicken or egg element to it, which is that I think we would look to those of you that are the experts in this area to make some recommendations to us, then communicate to the community. Here are some options. What do you think, as the members of this community, are those that you'd most like to see? But that's okay. That's why these conversations are important, because we can start to think about these things and maybe about how we want to approach that. But I really appreciate that comment, because I think it helps.
Communities don't want some professor coming in and telling them what to do. I've run into that. So it's also, or law enforcement. No one wants to be told what to do. So having that conversation about what options are available, what do we want, what is being done, because telling a clinician to ride along with the cop isn't just going to go over seamlessly, right? These are pieces that take this type of discussion.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's really important. I think what's helpful from the professional side of that is outlining those things for us that are not probably appropriate for a community like Laramie. and more or less saying, but there's a wealth of other options. What seems to fit the community? I think that's where that guidance comes in. Like I said, I think this is an important piece of this conversation. I've got the vice mayor and then Councilmember Cumbie and the city manager has been waiting. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And this is for Dr. White. Previously, I think I heard you say that there is no evidence to suggest that a co-responder scenario or whatever actually works. Is that what you said earlier?
Yes. The level of research on co-responder models is very, it's not very good. Most of it is out of the UK and Canada. That's their predominant model. And there is evidence to suggest that it can have some positive outcomes. Most of the research is from officer surveys, asking them, how has this program helped you? That is the strongest research we have, is just officers before, after, and but looking at emergency detentions, use of force, yeah, these outcomes that we tend to really focus on, there's not a lot of research that says, you know, let's develop a standardized program or recommendations. And that's okay. That's why we want to be part of a community that does contribute to that knowledge, right? That can say, this is what we did and this is what worked. And a lot of why it's difficult to build that body of research is because communities are all doing kind of little bit different things, right? They're having a follow-up, or they're having a secondary response. So the police officer goes and then they call the mental health professional. Mental health police call data is not very good. A lot of cities don't even have a mental health call type. So then you're trying to say, is there a reduction in mental health calls? But we don't have that as an identifier. Then you got to build that into your CAD system. So there's a lot of just, yeah, there's not a lot of evidence, and these programs are really new, and they're just taking off. So it's exciting to be, I think, part of where we can be, part of that, building that evidence.
And if I could just keep going with that. So what I think I'm hearing you say is, because this is new and because these type of activities are new, the landscape could be significantly different or have evidence or data, 2, 3, 5 years down the road where things could actually be, graphed, charted, and displayed and compared, right? Is that your expectation, to be 3 to 5 years down the road? Are you thinking 10? I mean, what's your...
Yeah, so grants I've done in the past, a lot of federal grants, BJA, are going to be 3 to 5 years. You have a year of planning. So if we were able to get data this summer, which Chief Stalder and I are working on, be working on that data in the fall, apply for grants in the spring, right? But a lot of the pieces, that partnerships are already being worked on now, that if we were able to get a grant, we could probably move things pretty quickly. UC Health, and bringing that into our, the data aspect should be pretty easy. And I think, but that's going to be where some of the legal stuff that I don't know those barriers. I don't know the legal barriers. I'm a researcher. So those are where the other experts in this meeting can help with, the practical aspects of a licensed clinician, or do we even need a licensed clinician? Those are other discussions that we're having, right? Who would we hire? Who could we hire? Can we use students? Would Laramie PD be okay with students riding in their car?
Right. Well, thank you, and thank everybody. And like I think Commissioner Gosar and Councilor Somerville make some really solid points in terms of definitely there's need now. It's just trying to weigh those avenues or choices, evaluate the barriers. It's a very complicated and involved issue, and I just so appreciate all the experts that are presenting tonight, because this is beyond what I know. So so thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I really appreciate this, and I really appreciate these last couple of exchanges we're having here, because I think what we're boiling down to is what you're hearing, I think, folks, is we want to identify some things that are actionable, but at the same time, we're also hearing that there's this very serious need for these things to be done carefully and responsibly, and with and frankly, so evidence-based. And what I'm hearing from Dr. White is, unfortunately, there's not so much of that we can go back and point to and say this helps us make those choices. So it's a really challenging position. Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in reflecting on this, I think a lot of this came to a head after the death of Robbie Ramirez. It brought the community into a place where they began to really think about it, to look at mental health crisis, police interactions. As we've said earlier, oftentimes when people are in mental health crisis, there is an acting out element to it that often does result in law enforcement. And as the community came together, I think that they began to talk more among themselves and to identify gaps that were occurring in service. And I think that there are three big concepts that we as council have heard over and over again: police oversight board, transparency, and police right along with therapists. I mean, those have been something that it caught hold, and those seem to be three concepts that have moved forward. And as you talk to people, it's not necessarily what they mean. They use those terms, but it's not necessarily what they mean. And I would say that part of our kind of urgency and asking for an action plan is that I don't go anywhere in public when we have a public event that I don't have multiple people come up to me and ask me what's going on, what's this. And so we are all getting a lot of pressure. And I don't think there's a bias toward Ride Along. I think Ride Along has an awful lot of problems and a ways to go. But I don't think there's a bias, but I think there's a pressure to begin implementing. And Kristen, I think that you've really kind of addressed that things are happening, but that it's incremental and it's not, as you said, Paul, the big star. It's these incremental things that build, or maybe the chief said it, that build toward that. And I think that communicating with our groups better, but I know that they want to know what action is happening. And if we can get some sort of informative brief where we're able to communicate when these people come up to me about like bullet points of what is happening and where we're moving. But I don't get a lot of pressure for the kind of ride-along model, but I do get a lot of pressure to fill those gaps. We do, and the other thing is you cannot build a program if you don't have the resources. And if you have all the money in the world, but you don't have competent therapists, then you can't build a program. So I guess we need to be kind of strategic about that. maybe scholarship funds with, I don't know. And we can talk about that, but it's a very complicated thing. And I thought it interesting tonight that we have YDOT and mental health on the same agenda, and they are both so complicated. So anyway, that's my piece. And I don't think there's an agenda here, but I think we do get a lot of pressure to do something.
Which is our job. Thank you, Councilmember Cumbie. And that's the other thing, right? From the community leadership perspective, you know, we're supposed to be trying to take that pressure and then work with folks to come to those outcomes.
I like talking to them.
Yeah.
But I know where the concerns are too, you know, so.
I think this is a hugely valuable discussion. I wish we had hours longer for. Kristen?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I appreciate the discussion tonight on a variety of different topics. I know that these are intense things and it brings up a lot of emotions for all of us because we're passionate about wanting to help serve our community and support. I don't mean to be a downer on this. I do want to highlight that we tried having mobile crisis in Cheyenne a number of years ago when we were still Peak Wellness Center. And unfortunately, we never had it up and fully operational 24 hours a day. We struggled to hire for the positions. We tried aggressively to hire, struggled myself as a supervisor, I worked outside of the hours of 8 to 5, Monday through Friday to help support, and did that triage in the evenings and overnights to help support. We even had times where we drove to Wheatland in the middle of the night to help support up there as well. And so I just want, as we think about all of these pieces, I know that we're all motivated. I'd like to snap my fingers and I'd like to be fully staffed and be able to say, I'm ready to take on the next piece and give me some funding and let's take those next steps with things. I also am faced with the reality as we're talking about this evening, mental health providers being a shortage. And that's again why we're building up with our paraprofessionals. I certainly wish that I could just move quicker on everything. I also want to highlight too that where we are with gatekeeping is a result of several years worth. The program was often running in that first year and we've had a number of revisions to it. And it has taken the collaboration of all of us that have been on the mental health board to continue to make that happen. So I guess I would have that as a call to action for everyone who's on this with us tonight, is to be a part of that with us. In helping to get this alternative crisis response. If we get the mobile crisis grant or get the SAMHSA grant and can build in that mobile crisis, help be that advocate and that support for us continuously on it, because it takes all of us to make this happen. And I look forward to that future collaboration as well as the ongoing collaboration that we've had.
In my role as a college professor, I talk about these issues all the time. And I talk to students about what Laramie's doing, what the country's doing, these debates that are going on about, you know, a lot of it comes down to rights. You can't hold someone indefinitely when against their will. That doesn't mean that they can really function in the community either. So it's, you know, it's a really big challenge to when the criminal justice system has been your mental health system for 50 years, right? So it's a huge struggle. But my students are very passionate about it. So I'm like, be a co-responder.
I think Councilor Cumbie's comment about this coming with YDOT is actually quite interesting, because what are we talking about here? I think in a major way, we're talking about public health infrastructure. I mean, that's what this is. And frankly, there's a long history of underinvestment, as Dr. White just outlined for us. City Manager, if you're still here, I'd like to call on you.
Thanks, Mayor. I think Kristen actually probably addressed a lot of what I was hoping to wrap up with tonight, but I did have a couple things I wanted to provide in terms of feedback, and thank you all for this very good conversation. Of course, I'm mindful to where we started the conversation, which is on the already adopted policy objective of the City Council for your staff, myself, your chief, to implement an alternative response model for our mental health calls for services. So a couple of things I wanted to just focus on that were in your cover sheet and your background information, and that is, you know, as I started off saying, the City of Laramie and our police department have really been the focal point in the community for all of the folks who are seeking alternative and better ways, right, to solve or to serve those with mental health needs. I'm going to say just very candidly, that is probably unfair. This is not just a City of Laramie problem. This is not just a law enforcement problem. This is a community-wide problem. I think we all know that, but I have to put it out there for posterity, and in part to sort of defend the police department, the Laramie PD. They have taken a lot of heat since 2020 for events that occurred in this community that Councilmember Cumby referenced, and a broader national conversation that's well needed and has the urgency that Commissioner Gosar so deftly pointed out surrounding mental health needs. And the pandemic, as we know, has probably only exacerbated the need for mental health to really be a focus in our community and in our nation. So what I would say to you, Council, just sort of wrapping up back to your policy goal, it's been my understanding from the way you've adopted that, that the objective of your goal was that we provide better care, basically, to people who need these kinds of services. And LPD is really just a very small part of a very big legal machine and a continuum of care. And so I have felt that the gatekeeping program that this group with our PD has already implemented in the community some years ago has been, one, not well understood by us, by me, by elected officials, and certainly by the broader community. And so one of the reasons for tonight was my hope that we would really dive into this. We've talked about it tangentially, probably, I was counting them up while we were sitting here, 6 times. We've had 6 meetings, I'm pretty sure, including tonight, now 7, in the last 24 months, where the gatekeeping program has been mentioned, but I feel like it's not been clearly understood. And so my hope for tonight, Councilor Schmeckel, is this is yet another marketing opportunity. You know, and I don't say marketing to sell people on something that's unreal or to convince them that some product has value when it doesn't, because this product has value and this is a real thing. But we need all of you to help us. And Councilor Cumby, your idea to have some kind of brief, I love it. Sort of speaking points, simple things. So when you guys are out in the community, you can talk to your constituents about what the gatekeeping program already is. It is already kind of an alternative response model. It's not co-responder, but it is alternative response. And then also be able to talk about the things that these guys have told you tonight that are evolving as we fine tune and we try to grow and make more expansive that program. And for the city, of course, that's important because we care about our constituents, but our officers as well. So the last thing I wanted to say is, absent counsel for you specifically, any direction to me to move forward and get ahead of the Mental Health Board, it has been my understanding since you adopted that goal back in March that we would continue our working with and through this board, because frankly the city isn't resourced. Councilor Cumby, you mentioned that word, I love it. You know, cities, municipal governments in Wyoming are not engaged traditionally in social services. I have nobody on staff who is a mental health professional. I have no infrastructure to support those services. I have no funding for that, and I don't have the right, frankly, experience. So it's been my intention as your city manager, I think the chief agrees, and he's welcome to disagree if he'd like, but it's been my intention to not get ahead of this board, but to continue to collaborate with them on going any further to modify the gatekeeper program or to implement any kind of co-responder model, if that's the specific thing we want, without sort of their blessing and frankly their resources brought to bear, because we just don't have some of these expertise on staff. So I'm putting that out there, and that's why I invited these guys tonight. I hope y'all don't feel raked over the coals too much, but I hope what you feel is the passion that everybody has about this issue across the city and the county. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I would love to circle back with you all, see if we can brief out this thing into a very simple, easy document for our elected officials, and maybe more importantly, we publish it so it's readily available for the community as well. Thank you guys very much, and Council, I'm happy for any more questions, but that's sort of what I was hoping to wrap up tonight, to say we need this network, I think, and I really appreciate their efforts, and I appreciate the county convening this, a few years ago, and I hope that we all realize that in so many ways, LPD and our community as a whole is really ahead of the curve on an issue that became a really big deal 2 years ago, but our folks were working on it 4 and 5 years ago. So I hope we don't feel behind. I hope we feel like we're kind of ahead.
Thank you very much, City Manager. I think that's it. Let me try to bullet point this, even though I said there's no way to do it, right? I'm going to do my best. I think there's a need for communication of the existing information, which we've addressed a couple of times here. I don't think the council is interested in giving the city staff a policy direction to get ahead of this mental health board. I don't believe that's the choice that we would want to make. I think we want to make responsible and informed choices in partnership with the county and with this board's work. I think we just, of course, you know, in our role, we do feel like we have to channel what we hear, and hopefully that was done, you know, in a respectful exchange. That's certainly our intention, and I hope that's what we had here. And I feel like this was a very valuable conversation. And of course, it's going to come back. It's going to come back.
Mayor, if I could just add one more thing. I know that you as an elected body, and I hear it even from our commissioners, have a sense of urgency, and I don't want you to feel like we're going to drag feet on this for 2 or 3 years. I will promise you this, if the board takes 4 years to bring us a recommendation, I don't know that I'm willing to wait that long. Your direction to me has been quite clear, and I think the chief agrees. I'll share with you, and I see Chief Stelter has his hand raised. You know, he has tremendous passion around this issue. Our soon-to-be retiring chief, unfortunately, but as we're recruiting a new chief to the community, this will be an issue that we're discussing with those candidates, and that they will need to understand is incredibly important to the city, to our community.
Chief Stelter?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, City Manager's comment kind of threw me off there. Sorry about that. What I'd indicate is with the bylaw revision of the Mental Health Board next Tuesday, Council will choose a liaison to the Mental Health Board. The commissioners will also have a liaison to that Mental Health Board. And what I've realized over the last several months in different conversations is that neither the commission as a whole nor the council as a whole has a full understanding of all of the good work that the Mental Health Board has done over the last 5 years. And hopefully the liaison will help us out with that. So I look forward to council appointing that liaison next Tuesday at the regular council meeting, and then have that liaison be able to report back to council about the progress that's being made by the Mental Health Board. I just wanted to add that comment.
I think it was important, Chief Stelter. Thank you very much. Ms. Cavello?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I'd like to echo what has been said, and again reinforce I appreciate everyone's participation tonight. I know this feels a lot of passion from several, gets us pretty fired up, and we want movement to be all things to our community. It can be a hard task to do. I appreciate the comment made about Chief Stelter leaving. I really appreciate the awareness from that coming from the city. That is going to be hard. Those are big shoes to fill. I'm in denial about it. I've told Dale that several times. And I look forward to hopefully being involved with who that next chief is and quickly getting on board, being a part of those next steps, because that is going to be a key piece of continuing to move forward. We were able to quickly do that with Kurt coming on board with the county attorney's office, and support from both Matt and Jennifer Curran has been phenomenal with that. And that has allowed us to gain momentum and to make continued changes with the gatekeeping program. So again, in my call to action for all of us to continue to support one another and to collaborate is really to look at who's going to fill Chief Stelter's shoes, and how is that person then going to continue to collaborate with the rest of us in making that forward movement. I look to having a close working relationship. I value Chief Stelter. Again, I'm not looking forward to him leaving. And if we're going to keep this momentum, we do need to install a chief then who is willing to join on board with the rest of us that are doing this work. Thank you again very much, everyone, for your time this evening. I certainly appreciate it. I appreciate us having these conversations and the ongoing support.
Thank you. I don't think anyone, with the possible exception of Dale Stelter, is looking for Chief Stelter leaving his current position. Commissioner Gosar, Chairman Gosar, are you? Do you have anything you'd like to add here as we close up this part of the work session?
No, Mr. Mayor, other than my thanks to the people who sit on the Mental Health Board and do the work every day trying to move the ball forward. They have been visionary and courageous, and I appreciate that. But like so many other things, there's more work to be done, and there's more people that need to do it. So thanks for having us on board today and be a part of this discussion.
We appreciate the partnership from the county on this every step of the way, because I think that's, as we've heard repeatedly tonight, that's what it's going to take. And that Mr. Britzius, obviously that the county attorney's role is huge in this as we move forward, and will continue to be. I really also appreciate this constructive discussion, and I want to echo the thanks. We should see if there's a public comment on this topic, and then we'll move to probably close this part of the work session. I'm sure some people are eager to get on with what's left of their evening at 9:19 p.m. Looks like it's all people in the know there on the attendees list. So I don't think we have any public comment. Thank you guys for giving up an evening to us for this important and at times difficult conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council members, we need to do a couple of quick things. Mostly just agenda review, I think. We'll check for public comments again if there are any. How about we review that agenda, folks? Oh, we have updates. Updates and council comments. Please, please excuse me. Updates and comments. Councilor Member Schuster.
Wyoming Territorial Park board meeting is next Monday, so I can't update on that, but they did have their vintage baseball game. It was really good. They took, I believe it's, Pat would correct me, Laramie Bisons played another team in the adult league, I'm going to call it. Railroad Depot meeting was during the League of Women Voters, so I didn't get to attend that one. And then our rifle range meeting is tomorrow night. And we have another League of Women Voters Thursday going on, which I will attend but will not be a participant. So I ask everybody, please pay attention to those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple quick ones. The Pilot Hill Board hosted Governor Gordon last night at the Willett Trailhead. Really just an opportunity to thank him for his support, both as treasurer and now as governor of the Pilot Hill project. All of the stakeholders were invited and attended. So Game and Fish, Forest Service. I shouldn't have gone down this path. I'm going to definitely forget somebody, but so I'm going to stop there and then I'll forget a bunch. But it was well attended. Councilor Gabriel was there as well, and as was I. The Pilot Hill Board also hosted a retreat today, which I was unable to make, but we'll loop you all in as that progresses. And then one final one, Wild Gives Day is tomorrow, as I'm sure all of you are aware. So, you know, shake out your wallets for all of the nonprofits in Wyoming that you love. We all know that the value those nonprofits give to our community. So I would encourage everyone to give tomorrow. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor. Of note on that Laramie Rifle Range Board meeting tonight, it's time for annual elections. There are 4 seats available and 5 candidates. Members are encouraged to come on out and vote.
Thank you. Councilmember Cumby.
Yes, the Disabilities Advisory Commission participated in, I'm trying to get my hand down, in both Pride Fest and also Freedom Has a Birthday. And we had the opportunity to have conversation with multiple people and to receive comments, both positive and where we might better things. And I think that our board is going to meet and we will put together a summary of that and I will present that to council what some of the comments by the public were. And that's it for right now. The other thing is Councilor Pierce and I are continuing. We're moving to the implementation phase of the COVID strategic response. I did discover that when you're trying to plan meetings, July 4th in Laramie is like trying to plan something during Christmas. So, so anyway, everybody's back to work, and I think we'll get that meeting and get going on that. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else with updates for us? If not, as our numbers dwindle here, let's take a look at the agenda. Quite a few items. Fortunately for us, many of them are returning items. The Vice Mayor and I didn't identify anything of concern necessarily in the agenda review, so just take a look and see how you feel about the items on consent and the regular agenda. So we can get the heck out of here, right? Councilmember Somerville.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to give a heads up. I've had a couple more conversations in regards to the Lewis Street vacation, and I do anticipate some public comment for that. So we'll need to make sure we kind of keep that in mind for an extended comment period for that.
Appreciate the heads up on that, Councilmember Somerville. Any other thoughts or comments on our agenda upcoming? Yes, Councilmember Schuster.
Same thing as Councilor Somerville. I'm friends with several of the teachers at the lab school, and yes, they might be commenting when they come that night. So thank you. I would have some time for that. I would set some time aside for that one.
Noted. Let's see, where does that appear on the agenda, folks? Since we're pointing that out repeatedly, we probably want to get that perhaps reordered and towards the beginning of the meeting. Vice Mayor, do you have thoughts about that? Perhaps we could do that in the pre-meeting.
I think right now it currently sits towards the end.
Yeah, I wonder if we might.
Number 19.
And Mayor, there's a public hearing for that as well. That'll be at the very top of the agenda. So,
okay.
But it might make sense to bring that up and earlier in the agenda. So the folks that are interested, if they're going to stay on for that.
My instinct is to put it towards the top of the agenda, even with the public hearing, and let those folks that want to share their thoughts, views, and perspectives about that do that earlier in the agenda. Perhaps we can get some folks from the other agencies to help clarify and answer questions. But the more of that we do towards the beginning of the meeting, the better. Councilmember Schmeckel?
I was just going to say the public hearing as well, so it's taken care of.
All right. Councilmember Schuster?
I wonder if we should check on how we want to write this agenda. Maybe that sounds like the wrong comment, but if we have a lengthy discussion on this vacation, we might want to consider items that may not make it next Tuesday night because of time restraints. So I would hope not, but I think we really ought to think our whole order of everything, look at things that we think really need to be done versus something that may have to go to the 2 weeks following that.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. I think it's absolutely the right comments. We're just trying to be responsible with time. I agree with you. Do we have bids or time-sensitive items that we can put immediately following wherever we place this item? Because I think probably what we're going to want to do is get that towards the top of the agenda, unless anybody's telling me they object to this, and then the time-sensitive items and bid-related items immediately following that, and then those items that don't suffer from perhaps not being addressed that evening can go towards the bottom. Councilmember Somerville?
Mayor, in addition, I wondered if we could move 18 and 20 to the consent agenda. They're only second readings, but they weren't controversial. It's the Laramie Business Park vacation and the one-word change to the industrial pretreatment program.
It's certainly a possibility that we could consider, folks. We're going to have to do this in the pre-meeting to just kind of keep your notes. I mean, I know the vice mayor will certainly go with whatever we decide then. Vice Mayor, do you have thoughts about this reordering? This is not stuff that necessarily occurred to you and I at the agenda meeting. I don't object to any of these suggestions.
From my perspective, and we're going to have to talk to the city clerk, but regarding Councilor Somerville's item 18 and 20, because we're having a public hearing on both of those, I'm not exactly sure if they can actually go on the consent agenda because of the public hearing, but I could be walking down a path that I don't know for sure, because I think there's a definite order and a time related to public hearings and second readings, or maybe I'm just
I think you're right.
I think I might be, I could be missing something. I mean, from my perspective, if items 11 through, frankly, 18 and including 20 should go really, really quickly. So from my perspective, I think keeping it as is makes some sense to me, other than maybe switching 19 and 20 and keeping the Lewis Street issue as the last item, because I feel like we can shoot through. We'll have the public hearing. That'll be roughly at 6:30-ish, right? 6:37-ish by the time we get there. And then it shouldn't take too long to get through the other ones. I mean, they're pretty, I don't know, to me, they seem quick. I mean, I could be, even 21, we should be quick. And then, we shoot through those quick, and then we do the Lewis Street issue last.
We may also get an executive session, we're told. We don't know yet. So that's also something else to keep in mind. I like the Vice Mayor's suggestion. Vice Mayor, Council, and Clerk, I wonder if we might try the following approach. Why don't we keep it as is, see how it goes, and if something earlier in the agenda begins to eat time, we reorder as necessary. We've certainly done that as the council before. Objections? Everyone okay?
I was willing to bet on the executive session.
We'll see how it goes. If we have to make motions to reorder in the meeting because the clock is against us, I think we'd just be prepared to do that. We've had to do that in the past, although rarely. And I think we should give that a try. Councilmember Somerville?
I just forgot to put my hand down.
No problem.
That's fine.
Is everybody, yeah, City Clerk.
Mayor, just for what it's worth, I agree with yours and Vice Mayor's comments on that. I think the SLIB grant items should go fairly quick, but I believe they are time sensitive. So if you were able to address those first, I think that would help. And then also the MOC landscaping may or may not be an item that the bidding or the price of materials could fluctuate. So if that item could be addressed as well, I see those as being the most time sensitive.
Thank you. Your input is always welcome. Okay, we'll stick to the plan. And then if we have to think on our feet a little bit, we will do so. And we should be able to get through this even with comment, I think. We'll just have to be a little bit mindful. Okay. With that said, yes, Councilmember Cumby. Okay, Councilmember Cumby is ready to go. Let's close the work session and say goodnight. And I thank you all very much. Not the easiest work session. Feels more like one of those regular meetings where we leave a little bit exhausted. Good night and thank you.
Night, everyone.